Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the rescheduled City Council regular meeting. It's Monday, November 18th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu. Here. Mr. Evans.
Here.
Ms. Hersey.
Here.
Ms. Colasetti. Here. Ms. Bishop. Ms. Welkin. Here. Mr. Quisenberry. Mayor Marlin.
Present. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the previous meeting from October 28th, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Jaya. Any substantial corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Next up are additions or corrections to the agenda. Chris?
Thank you. I'd like to move that ordinance number 2024-11-037, an ordinance revising the annual budget to invest in a grocery store in Ward 3, budget amendment number 3, be removed from tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Sharice. Will all those in favor please say aye?
Could we know more? Could we speak to that motion? Give some
I can
info?
tell you this motion is going to be reintroduced next week at the City Council based on the information that has been received since the ordinance and the budget amendment was written. So you'll see it's coming back next week. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. Presentations and public input. We don't have any presentations scheduled to my knowledge. We are ready to take public input. I do want to remind folks that this meeting is the rescheduled city council meeting. It's got a pretty light agenda. It includes the liquor license for the El Patron Ballroom on North Cunningham and the resolution for the tax levy. We'll also have an update on work that's been done to date on the grocery store ordinance, but again, the formal budget amendment and action on that item will be taken next week, but we welcome your comments, of course, tonight. This will be followed by the regular committee of the whole meeting, which is a very meaty agenda. It includes the zoning ordinance related to the text amendments in the zoning ordinance, and then several grant improvements and some other items. If you're here to speak on that item, I'd encourage you to wait till that meeting so the meeting record is clear as far as public input on the specific topics. So, does anyone wish to address the Urbana City Council? Please step forward to the microphone and state your name for the record.
Hello. I know that this is not the applicable meeting, but since the holiday is next week and some of the people are going to be out of town, I did want to make a comment about some of the stuff that will be on next week's agenda. My name is Adani Sanchez. I'm with a group called Curbanism Club, who has an interest in creating more housing units, more transit options, just basically trying to create our communities of abundance so that we have enough places for the people that we want to come here and stay. So I just wanted to talk about encouraging all of y'all to vote yes to allow duplexes in R2. I think this is a very gentle way of increasing density, something that we increasingly need in a growing community, which my understanding is that all of y'all want to keep growing, and so part of that is making sure that we have room for everyone without overspreading and expanding the capacity for infrastructure. So by preserving resources, we can increase density very gently, especially with just duplexes, but I hope you can do whatever you can to encourage greater density everywhere just so that we have room for everyone. And doing other things to allow more affordable housing and incentivize the housing that we want to see. So if we really like duplexes, encouraging that, but also we also need apartment complexes, we also need triplexes. So I hope you consider that as part of the abundance here in Urbana. Consider allowing duplexes in other areas, but definitely R2. Thank you.
Thank you.
From what I understand, y'all, are you going to talk, ma'am? I'm just, okay, thank you. I'm Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, and apparently this is the only time the public input for what I see on the agenda that we can talk about what's going to come up later on about the grocery store. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you.
Speak about the grocery store.
Ma'am?
Yes, you may speak about the grocery store.
Yes, that's what I want to speak
Okay.
about. I just wanted to say initially, well, I guess hopefully you've gotten some of the emails from many of the people that I've spoken with. And they looked at the newspaper and all. We've been needing it. We're a desert. Well, anyway, let me read this right quickly so I don't waste all of my time. Not waste. There's nothing waste about anything you can say about the need for a grocery store in North Urbana. Dr. Ellis subdivision, the King area, and all. And anybody can come, but we need to have a grocery store. We've been wanting this for a long time. Sharice Hersey, when she got on the, Ms. Hersey, when she got on the city council, she talked about it. Deborah McFarland, when she got on the commission, she talked about it publicly. and other leaders in our community. And I would just like to say, dear Mayor Marlin and members of the City Council, Urbana City Council, I'd like to thank. When I think, I have to. When I think, I have to thank. You'll get that one day. Mrs. Angela Bradley for her integrity in contacting current residents to support her effort and determination to apply for a grocery store in Ward 3. I hope that the council will approve this start of one of the necessary resources for the North End. I was hoping I could have some of my people stand up from, the ones who are going to help us and the one who live in our area. Stand up tonight. Stand up, stand forth for this idea. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address the council?
Good evening, Council. My name is Darlene Bailey, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the grocery store. As you've heard from many people, it's a wonderful idea, but it will also generate tax revenues. We need that in that area. I believe I took a look at it, and if I just use $100, I bet you I spend 90 of them in Champaign. So therefore, it would be a benefit to the city as well as to the area. And with the tax exempt developments you have going in that area, it will be very beneficial for us all over. I've taken a look at Imagine Urbana, and I can see that going on. I know there's some steps that has to be taken. It's a huge undertaking, but I believe we can get there. Thank you.
Let's leave it, I'll take it off. Let's take this off. Good evening, everyone. So I'm here, I'm for the grocery store also, coming to Urbana. It would be really great to be in our community, and it'll be for everyone. And I believe at this time that Champaign is really developing family. We have lots and lots of new entities in Champaign, Urbana, family here. So I'm just happy all the way around. I do have a concern. I like the ideal because it's not just a liquor store. It's not just a casino. It's not just something of addiction. And I just believe that we have enough liquor stores in our communities, and that's white, black, Chinese. I don't care. We have to protect our people. And every day I'm dealing with a lot of people who's addicted, and they just walk out their house and go get it. It's in their neighborhoods, okay? And so if we build a grocery store, that's something different. That's like, okay, we're going to look out for everyone, and we're going to build something that is going to be needed, but is positive. It's not a negative, right? Because we could say what we want to say, but when you constantly build liquor stores in different areas of people who just don't have control, of their own thoughts because they have things going on with them, and they might not be strong as us. You probably could put 15 liquor stores in my community right there at my house, right next door to my house. I would never buy liquor, but I don't drink. I don't have an addiction. See, I don't have an addiction. But my heart go out to those of them who's addicted. And we have too many smoke shops. Every time we bring some in the community, it's 12 from Florida and Philo, all the way back down to Rice Street in Urbana. I counted 12 today. I went out and counted 12. 12. So I rode around the neighborhood to see if I could find something positive or if I could find something more meaningful, right? For all people, all people. I'm not talking about just black and white. I'm talking about for all people. What's from Florida all the way to Rice Street in Urbana? Because Rice Street divides Champaign, right, and Urbana, right? So we have too many. I don't want you to take them away. I'm not saying that. I don't go against no one's wealth. However you make money, that's on you. But I just say that we have to be smart and we have to be caring and loving. And I believe that's why I live in Champaign, Urbana. Okay? Let's think about everyone. Okay? And especially not put another liquor store nowhere. I wish we could take away the liquor license. Because now they just popping up. Someone else just told me they getting ready to get liquor license. I'm like, oh my God, you don't do the liquor. And they said, why? I said, because you're hurting people who's addicted. They're not going to tell you they're addicted. They glad that it's in the neighborhood where they can walk to it and get it. But if you walk into a grocery store and it's convenient for you, that's all I'm saying. That's more better because they're going to walk to whatever's near. And that's what I want to leave you with. If I'm addicted or I have problems or I'm low income, I'm going to walk to the nearest. I don't care what it is, okay? But let's look out for everyone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Bradley, and I just wanted to thank the residents of Ward 3 for allowing us to hear your voice, allowing us to hear your concerns and sharing that with our city leadership. I also wanted to thank Councilwoman Sharice Hersey for being a longtime champion of yours. And it was only through her example that I would even know that this was an issue for our community. And I also just want to thank Mayor Marlin and the council for looking so deeply into this issue and so diligently to try to find out what's the best thing for the city. So just want to thank everyone.
Good evening. I'm Eric Sachs, and I would like to lend my support as well to strongly endorse ordinance number 2024-1137 for the grocery store in Ward 3. The absence of a grocery store in Northwest Urbana has been a major problem for decades, and there have been many who've sought solutions to this, trying to bring in outside large companies, and that has not yet been successful. So with state funding on the table for a large portion of this project, it is a unique and valuable opportunity. Moreover, it is great to see someone local to develop a solution to a long-standing local problem. The matching funds that this ordinance would provide are critically important, yet a modest investment in our community. Thank you.
My name is Marina Manetti, and I just checked out the site about this issue, and I saw that all the work is going to be involved in making this happen, and I'm just daunted by the energy and commitment of people to support this. I think it's a spectacular thing that's being done by local people. For me, it's frightening, even the idea of starting something like this. However, this is something that I see as very, very helpful to everybody in the community. I wouldn't support another liquor store. I just don't think that's needed. You can walk a little further for the alcohol, but for the food, for the children, for the people who need nutrition, for the community, this is something that should not be ignored and should be supported wholeheartedly. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Carmen Blue. I'd also just like to voice support for the grocery store in the North End. It doesn't sound like large corporate grocery stores agree that everyone deserves walkable access to healthy local food, but lots of us here do, even beyond Ward 3. I'm a resident of Ward 1, I think. And also, I think this is like an exciting opportunity for local farmers. I'm really impressed by the effort that Ms. Bradley has invested in forging partnerships with the local community of people producing food here. It's exciting to see a new market share for folks that are actively farming and folks that might farm someday if they know that there's a guaranteed space for their food to be purchased within their community. Thanks.
Does anyone else wish to address the council?
Hi. I'm a little short. Okay, so I wanted to address the council. Number one, I definitely support the grocery store.
Could you state your name for the record,
I'm
please?
sorry, my name is Carrie Hacker, and I actually reside in Philo, but longtime resident. My grandchildren are 6th generation to be from Champaign County. And I've lived in Urbana, went to school in Urbana, and I do business here and work and play and everything else here. So, but the one thing that I definitely want to address more, for me personally, importantly, is the need for affordable housing. And I definitely support the duplex reauthorization or reordinance or whatever you want to call it, because affordable housing is definitely needed. The other thing that I really would like the city of Urbana to take a look at is, I really appreciate that the city of Urbana has the tenant landlord ordinances. One of the things I'd really love you guys to look at involves the application process going in the door. There's a lot of predatory practices being done by landlords, and it's not just Urbana, it's across Urbana and Champaign. People are going in to apply for housing, and they get they'll tell them, hey, I might have an eviction 3 years ago, will that impact me? You'll just have to apply. Well, my credit score might be a little under 600, is that okay? Well, you'll just have to apply. They know up front what the criteria is for approval on rental applications, and they will not disclose it. I work with people that are spending $300, $400, $500 a month applying for places and being denied at every place. I'm not asking the council to take a look at changing any business practices. The only thing I would love for them to do is require landlords to be transparent of what the application approval criteria is. That is within the fair housing laws. You absolutely, especially since you are a home rule municipality, you absolutely can do that. I reached out to and spoke with, today, I spoke with Bob Palmer. He's part of the Housing Action Illinois. and was asking him the legalities of this. And he said, well, you know, Urbana and Champaign are both home rule. They absolutely could pass a transparency ordinance for landlords. He said, what you can't do, though, is pass any ordinances regarding rent caps. So I was like, darn, I was really hoping that was going to be a thing, but apparently not, at least not yet. So, you know, hopefully people will be out here advocating for that at the state level. But that's what I want to say, and I love Urbana. You guys have a really laid-back vibe, always have had. Champagne's really awesome, too, but that's more of an industrial sort of a vibe, and you guys are more just very laid-back, and I love that the city council is, you guys are pretty strong at advocacy. So thank you for that. Thank you for the council, and go Rockets.
Hi, my name is Michelle Casio. I'm a proud resident of Ward 4. I'm here to speak on behalf of Ward 3. I'm so excited to hear about a grocery store in Ward 3, and I fully support it. That Ward 3 has been desperate for one and needs one, and Black people in Ward 3 deserve to have access to grocery stores and food. So I hope that that is an ordinance that passes to begin with. Two, I'm here to speak on behalf of the ordinance on talking about duplexes in Urbana. On Ward 4, we have duplexes in my neighborhood that I live in. Not only does it bring more people to our neighborhoods and people who can be in schools and live here, who can deserve to live here and do so, it also makes Urbana a better place to live because it makes housing affordable in Urbana, which right now across Champaign County and Urbana specifically, it is not affordable for our residents. People cannot afford to live here, cannot afford to buy homes, they can afford to rent homes. So if there is ordinances that helps make housing more affordable and makes housing more readily available for our county, I think that's a great thing to have. So I hope that you all will take that into consideration. I work in housing specifically, and I can see that residents in Champaign County are struggling to find equitable and accessible housing that they can afford. So I hope that you all take into consideration that people who live here want more folks to live here, want folks to be able to afford to live here and not struggle and be able to stay in their county that they're supposed to be in. I love Urbana because people love being here, they love their community, I love my community, and I hope that you all think about that as we talk about redistricting and having more ordinances to make housing, I guess, more affordable and housing more accessible in our community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stuart Levy. I live in Champaign, but I work and often shop, including just a few minutes ago, and I do things in Urbana, so I feel like I have a stake here. And I just wanted to speak in support of the proposal to help a grocery store happen. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I didn't even plan this. I like grocery stores. I'm wearing a t-shirt of another grocery store. Grocery stores help keep people healthy, and I am so glad that the city has not committed all its funding reserves so that it has the capacity to do this, and I hope you will.
Any other individuals wishing to address the council? Okay. One day you'll be wearing Heartstrong shirts, I'm sure, right? Okay. We'll move on to council input and communication. J.F.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I apologize. We have some emails to read into the record that have been requested. I'll start for the topics on this meeting agenda. This is from Esther Pat. Dear Mayor Marlin, Urbana City Council members, please vote to approve the $800,000 budget amendment to provide 25% local match for the Illinois Grocery Initiative grant for Heartstrong Meals to establish a grocery store in Northwest Urbana. For more than 4 decades, people who live in Northwest Urbana have been asking city officials to help to get a proper grocery or supermarket in the neighborhood. Those of you who are older might remember that in 1990, Walmart announced It would open its first store in our community at Lincoln and Bradley. Mayor Markland and his staff worked diligently on that project, but then Walmart backed out and chose a Champaign location because it was close to both I-57 and I-74. When you drive on North Lincoln Avenue, you might notice that the Onyx apartment complex on the west side of the 1300 block north is set very far back from the street. The reason is that in 1997, when a complex was developed as the TIF project, city officials were still trying to get a grocery or supermarket in the neighborhood and set aside that land for the purpose. And here we are 27 years later, and finally someone has a viable plan to leverage state funds for our community to open a grocery store in Northwest Urbana. I know you face so many compelling needs for money, but please consider how very important and how very long the people of the neighborhood have had to wait to shop for groceries near their homes. Thank you for your service and the incredible amount of time you spend sitting through long meetings. This message is from Ingrid Melliff. Dear members of the City Council, I'm writing to ask you to provide the 25% local match for the organization that is trying to establish a good grocery store in the Urbana Ward 3 area. Food deserts are a national disgrace, and as a city, we should do all we can to make sure they do not exist in our neighborhoods. This is from Sana Sabuwala. Dear Urbana City Council, my name is Sana Sabuwala. I live in Urbana. I strongly support spending city money to pay the $800,000 portion necessary for the Illinois Grocery Initiative to match with $2.4 million to open a grocery store. Eliminating a food desert by creating a local space for people to get groceries is, in my opinion, an excellent use of city funds. This will positively impact Ward 3 residents. It's a human rights issue. People deserve access to food. Through the Illinois Grocery Initiative, getting people this access is even easier. I urge the Council to take the necessary steps to allow for the opening of a grocery store in Ward 3. This is from Lila Leopold. My name is Lila Leopold. I live in Ward 4. I write to add my voice to those who stand in support in the strongest possible terms for a grocery store in Ward 3. Every penny of the $800,000 potentially allotted by Council to match the $2.4 million Illinois Grocery Initiative state grant will be well spent. The health, social, and financial benefits of access to fresh food nearby cannot be understated. Access to a nearby community-focused supermarket should not be the privilege of any one zip code, especially in a country in which health care is neither universal nor easily accessible. And this is not to diminish the incredible local initiatives and public health department we have here. The ability to regularly and easily access food nearby will collectively save residents untold health and pharmaceutical costs and be a very real, concrete step toward addressing health disparities across the community. This is not even to mention the benefits of offering jobs, collaborative and innovative planning opportunities, and a place for community to gather in small and large ways around food on a daily basis. We all need to eat, and all residents deserve to have a choice in what we feed ourselves and what we feed our families. This issue is at the heart of addressing systemic inequalities, and one that, when directly supported, has incredible potential to reverberate across Urbana and beyond. This is a chance to support very real community care, and I'm proud to live somewhere where such an initiative is up for a vote by Council. City money could not be better spent. Yes, yes, yes to a grocery store in Ward 3. This is from Derek Briles. Hello, my name is Derek Briles, and I'm a resident of Urbana Ward 4. I'm in writing in support of the ordinance to amend the budget to free up $800,000 in order to receive state funding to build a grocery store in Ward 3. Over the years, I've seen this council allocate funds to many things that seem to have little to no positive impact on the working people of Urbana, particularly the black working class. While the UPD, who historically over-polices the black community, receives millions and still asks for more, precious little funds are allocated to proactively improve the material conditions of those with the greatest need. According to the Census Bureau data, 27.7% of Urbana lives in poverty, and the average household income is less than $42,000. The poverty rate in Illinois is 11.6, and the median household income is roughly $80,000. I hope you find these numbers embarrassing, because I certainly do. I think we can all agree it's far past time that we address the systemic inequalities extant in our community. While I do understand you have spent down the budget considerably, throwing money at the gaping hungry maw that is the police force and wasted a fair amount on a consultant that turned tail and ran when the city demanded transparency. An inadequate amount of funds have been allocated to the working people of this city who are pushed further and further to the margins. Here you have a chance to fund something that could be helpful. I'll go on record saying I am skeptical of ventures such as these, as I fear it will result in an exploitative company price gouging our underserved Black neighbors. But I still believe this is a project worth funding. I'm proud to see my alderperson's name attached to this ordinance, and as a member of her constituency, it has my support. This is from Adam Nichols. I'm Adam Nichols. I've spoken out publicly about fiscal responsibility numerous times. Tonight I'm writing about the proposal related to funding a grocery store in Ward 3. Although the proposal doesn't seem to use the word grant, it appears that's what it is on the table. Money provided for a specific purpose without any expectation of direct repayment. A one-time cost of $800,000 may be small as compared to the annual recurring budgets for some departments, but that doesn't mean it should escape scrutiny. The big questions are, why should the city government step in here to spend taxpayer money on a private business? The default option is for the city to do nothing. This could mean that the grocery store doesn't get opened, people have to continue to go farther to get groceries, and things continue as we do today. The alternative is to provide funding to a business being started by a local resident so people can have better access to healthy foods. The pros: number one, people don't have to go as far to get healthy food. Number two, another tax-paying business in Urbana, and not one that will send the profits off to Wall Street investors or overseas to some tax haven. 3, local jobs would be created. 4, the city is more walkable. The cons: the people of Urbana pay roughly $20 per capita. It's $800,000 divided by 40,000 residents. It's not often I advocate for more government spending, but in this case, I think it's a smart move. It aligns with what the economic goals of the city, it supports a local business, and serves the needs of the residents. It's not a recurring cost and will likely pay for itself over time with increased tax revenue. Please vote to approve this ordinance. Let's take a chance on trying to end this food desert. I believe that's all the, on grocery?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Good afternoon. I'm writing in support of the city allocating funding for the proposed grocery store in Ward 3. Ward 3 has been a food desert for a long time, which is extremely harmful for the health and well-being of the community. Poor nutrition and food insecurity, especially for children, can have huge impacts on their well-being now and later in life. Eliminating these food deserts is important for addressing the legacies of racism in the U.S. and Champaign-Urbana, as these food deserts disproportionately affect Black communities. While the council might have concerns about the cost and reducing the amount in the general operating fund, I would ask the council to consider that, number one, spending the $800,000 will also be bringing in $2.4 million into the city, which should be seen as an investment in the health and safety, and numerous studies showing the link between proper nutrition and reduced crime of Ward 3. Number two, it's rare that a private citizen like Angela Bradley is willing to step up and lead a major effort to improve their community like this. Supporting this kind of initiative from the community is important and would set examples for other people in the community that they can be leaders for change and that the city of Urbana will stand behind them. It would be a missed opportunity to make Urbana better to turn away such a large funding opportunity and committed member of the community. Please approve the funds for creating this grocery store in Ward 3. Brian Maxwell, resident of Ward 5. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to council input and communications. Jan.
Thank you. Related to the grocery store, I just wanted to make it clear that I'm only supporting taking it off of this week's agenda because it's coming back next week, and I'll look forward to hearing more about that. I also want to thank Mayor Marlin for reading comments from my ward. I usually am very proud to do so, but I'm fighting a migraine, so apologize for looking oddly at anybody tonight. I just appreciate that help with making sure everyone's input is provided. And then just briefly, and I mentioned this last week, but I'm just going to push again for ensuring that the alternate response task force gets back up and on track as quickly as possible, and that the initial intent of those funds is followed through, and that we do see a meaningful exploration of alternate responses to calls for services. That's it.
Grace.
Thank you. Thanks for all the input and everyone who came out tonight. Want to speak on just a few things here. I'm in support of the grocery store and funding for that, and I appreciate some information that I got since last week from various sources, from Angela Bradley and her team. I think that we need some creative options as far as what funds we use and what's available. I'm looking forward to learning more, I'm guessing, in the reports of officers and next week, and hoping that everything's still smooth with the timeline. And I think that there are creative ways that we can get this priority funded, as well as some of our other priorities that we have. And then the second point, also echoing some of Jaya's last point of the Alternative Response Task Force and the need to keep that going and some of that momentum. I've had some interest. I've been learning more about LEAP, Law Enforcement Action Partnership, if anyone wants to start looking up some about it, if you aren't already familiar. I'm hoping that we can have some more information coming and figure out what the process is on that. But I think it'd be really important to keep that task force going and find new leadership in facilitating some of the proposals. Thanks.
Mary Alice.
I just wanted to add that I'm very thankful that not only that residents of Ward 3 came out to tell us their thoughts, but also other residents within the community came out. I think that there is strong support among City Council into making this happen, and also from the mayor. I look forward to hearing about different options that we have in order to get this off the ground. I recognize that we are under a short time frame here, so hopefully by next week everything will be ironed out and we can move forward. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Alderperson Sharice Hersey from Ward 3 for her steadfast leadership over the last 6 years on the grocery store. And her vision is a major driver in this. I want to thank, of course, Angela Bradley for stepping up and taking the risk and getting this going. And I want to thank Mayor Marlin for stepping up with her leadership. There's a lot of balls in the air regarding this grocery store, but we're trying to get things organized and make it happen. So thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Any other council members? I just want to reassure folks that yes, the Alternative Task Force is also a high priority. Right now, all hands on deck are focused on the grocery store. We recently, just late last week, received the final invoice from Barry Dunn as far as the charges for their work on the task force. We'll get the figures to you as far as what's left, and then we'll have to absolutely, the plan is to find another facilitator. There will be funds are available for that, and get that task force up and running. So yes, the commitment is still there. It's just this week it's grocery stores, morning, noon, and night. So it's going to happen.
Hello?
Sharice, go ahead.
Okay. I didn't know if anyone could hear me. I wanted to also say that totally in favor, and because this is something that I've been working for a long time, and kept in touch with the staff of the city and their progress and their findings and everything. I want to thank Angela in particular. She and I had very long conversations yesterday, and she is enthusiastic and extremely committed to trying to make this happen, and I appreciate that. This is not something that I was in the loop on from the beginning, and but now I am, and so I would. I'm trying to help her as much as possible as far as where we can go from as far as vetting this properly and having it done decent and in order. So, Angela, I thank you very much for your commitment to figuring this out and giving us the opportunity to work through all of the issues that need to be worked through. Chris and Jaya, it's appreciated that you, I guess, started the ball rolling. But moreover, I'm overwhelmed by all the support that I see from not just Ward 3 residents, but from other people in the Urbana area. It's too bad that it's like down to the wire like this is, but I do still appreciate the support. Thank you.
Okay, I think everyone.
Diane?
Oh, hi, James. Go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to say that I'm really glad to hear that there's been a lot of effort on a lot of people's parts to look at this. I know when we heard about it just a week ago as a presentation, there were a lot of questions, and people have stepped up. I'm very happy to hear that Sharice is in the loop, because I know how important this has been to her over her time on City Council. This is an item that is on the council and mayor goal set for a reason. It's a thing we need to do. I am comfortable with taking risks to make this happen. I do think the discussion that's going on now and will go on the next week is important, because we are talking about a significant investment, and understanding more details of it will make us more comfortable with the risk. I do want to remind everyone that our goal here is to make a commitment that allows for us to apply for the grant. If you've looked at the DCEO website and see what happened with the first round of grants, you can see that this is a possible outcome for us, but we will have to go through that process and hope it will come out, if we can get our commitment in and get our application in, that it will come out favorably. I also will remind everyone to look at that, because the first round of grant applications occurred in March, and the announcement of who received them didn't happen till October. And I think it's important to realize that this may be a longer term process that may go beyond what the current fiscal year constraints are. And so we have to be thinking in long-term ideas about how we fund this that goes beyond what this particular budget year is. I'm pretty sure that there are options out there. There's been a number of great ideas that have popped up as a part of this thought process, and I'm confident that we're going to get somewhere positive by next Monday. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everyone. We'll move on. Reports of standing committees. There are none. We'll have a report from the Committee of the Whole. Chris Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, we have no consent agenda. We'll move to the regular agenda, and I move that resolution number 2024-11-072R, a resolution approving an increase in the number of liquor licenses in the Class A designation for Fuentes 10 LLC, El Patron Ballroom at 1006 North Cunningham Avenue.
There's a second.
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Mary Alice. Discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes.
I would also move that resolution number 2024-11-073R, a resolution estimating the tax levy for fiscal year 2024 to 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Chris, seconded by Chandra. Any discussion? Grace.
Thanks. Just wanted to restate and clarify that this is our thing we've been doing the past few years where we're keeping the rate the same, right? Although some people may experience some increases from other bodies or because their assessed value increased, that the city's being consistent and keeping our rate the same.
Any other discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Chris. There are no reports of special committees. We'll move on to reports of officers. We will give an update on the grocery store initiative. I'm gonna kick this off, kind of give some background, just so we have this in the public record, and then I'll turn it over to Carol, and she's got information that was requested by council last week as far as funding options, and then we'll talk about next steps, and the intent is to get this done next meeting. So, as you know, the City of Urbana has been asked to fund a local match for the application for an Illinois Grocery Initiative grant, which is issued by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO. The applicant, Angela Bradley, is seeking $2.4 million in state funds with a local match of $800,000. Their goal is to build a new grocery store in North Urbana, Ward 3, which has been classified as a food desert. Food deserts are defined as census tracts meeting specific poverty standards, population density, limited fresh food accessibility. This program intends and aims to combat food insecurity by reimbursing applicants for eligible capital and non-capital costs associated with building a grocery. I want to be very clear up front. Developing a grocery store in this neighborhood is a high priority for the city, and it's been incorporated into the mayor city council goals. I support the project. I think we all support the project. We recognize that the Illinois Grocery Initiative program represents a unique opportunity to leverage state dollars, local dollars, to secure state funds to bring a much-needed grocery store to a neighborhood that's been waiting for one for 40 years. In full transparency, however, I want to acknowledge the challenges associated with this particular request, mainly because of the extremely short time period we have to make the funding decision and do all the logistics related to that. The grant application is due December 2nd. Normally, when considering a request for funding, particularly one of this magnitude through a grant program or a redevelopment proposal, we follow a standard process in order to be fair and consistent to all applicants. That process can include evaluating the project feasibility, the developer capacity, appropriate level of city contribution, financial risk, opportunity costs to the city. We ask for developer equity, experience, detailed construction costs, take steps to limit city exposure, require a pro forma, business plan, and many other documents. And we formalize expectations and parameters through development agreements or grant agreements, all of which is intended to help us spend your tax dollars responsibly. In this case, the city's being asked to provide $800,000 as the local match. This is a large ask. It's similar to some of the biggest ARPA grants, for example, that we awarded just in recent years. City staff and council received some of the required financial documents, including the proposed budget, last night. That's the reason we're delaying this by 1 week. We simply have to have the time to do at least some of the due diligence that we normally do for a proposal of this magnitude. Last week, the City Council also asked staff to provide options for potential funding sources within our budget, and we're going to do that. Carol's going to present that information shortly. I want to emphasize that we'll provide this match while complying with our established financial policies. That is very important. And I also want to say I personally had a long, productive conversation. Well, I had a lot of conversations with folks yesterday, but a long conversation last night with Angela Bradley and the technical consultant who's working with her on this grant, who's from Western Illinois University. And we have also scheduled an in-person meeting with them this coming Friday between city staff. So we'll be able to, over the course of this week, fill in and answer a lot of the questions we had and fill in some of the blanks that we have. All of this is to say that we're working very hard to perform some due diligence that you expect and you deserve within a very, very tight time frame. So Carol will discuss the options that that the council has to consider which funds or a combination of funds that they want to use to fund this. We'll get council directions on that, and then we will draft a new ordinance and a new budget amendment that reflects the updated information we've been receiving and that reflects council direction that we get tonight, and that'll be brought back to the regular council meeting scheduled for next Monday. So we're just taking this week to do the due diligence that we really have to do in this. So I'll turn this over to Carol.
Thanks. And I do want to acknowledge we have people, you know, we've been sort of sprinting to catch up, and we've been using all the creativity at our disposal. And some of those creative people are here to answer questions that I'm just giving you the latest, which is evolving. So Will is here, Andrea's here, Elizabeth is here, I'm here, and the mayor's here. We've all been very actively working on this. Okay, so there's some options. I think we have some good options for where this money could come from. So I'm just going to run through those and make a few comments about each, and then talk about one that we explored that led to more ideas. Okay, so the first one is the general fund, and you identified that in the originally proposed ordinance as a possibility. I think you're all aware that the amount that's being requested would require you to waive the financial policy that limits or that requires a minimum amount of money that's in the fund balance to be retained. So that would require a waiver of the financial policy. And it would also put us in a position, which is perfectly at your discretion to decide, that going forward through the rest of the fiscal year, which has 7 months still to go, that we would then, if we needed bring a budget amendment for something that was unforeseen, then we would be continuing to need waivers on the financial policy because we'd be digging into the fund balance to a greater degree. So that's the general fund. I explored with staff the possibility of using CDBG money. So what I would like to share with you about that is that in general, this would be an allowed use of CDBG funds. However, the activity itself needs to be identified in the annual action plan. The activity itself needs to be identified in the annual action plan. And the last time that we had economic development activities in the annual action plan was the 21-22 program year. And for that program year, we have less than $10,000 currently available. So that doesn't mean we can't amend the annual action plan, but we would, that's a more time-consuming process. So that doesn't look like a good prospect, but we did explore CDBG. A couple of weeks ago, with Will leading the conversation, there was a conversation about ARPA reallocation. And so there's money, as I think you were was explained, there's money in the sewer lining project that could be reallocated because that was still an open question about whether or not, you know, how to spend what's left in that particular pot. This would, even though it's not a sewer lining project, it would qualify. Second, it's in the same neighborhood that was targeted, which is Dr. Ellis, and and there's a minimum amount of money for sure of $300,000 that could be available, up to probably $500,000. And then were you to, and so you could take money from that project. You could also, were you so inclined, the money that you had designated in the reallocation conversation for social services, that could go, and that total pot of reallocation money for ARPA could total $800,000. And again, as the mayor mentioned, these could be in combination. So this is not, you don't have to just pick one thing necessarily. Then what we haven't, I think you're aware that exists, but we haven't talked about in terms of the dollar amount. We invested our ARPA allocation when we got it, and we, from the time we received it to now, we're at around $772,000 in interest. That interest does not have the same restrictions on it as the ARPA money, so you don't have to, it's not limited on, it's really at your discretion how you want to spend it and when you want to spend it. So in the email that Elizabeth sent me last Thursday, she said that we'd probably be at $800,000 very soon, so that's a source of money, all or part from the ARPA interest. Again, that's not constrained in any way. The last thing that I want to share that we explored, which led to something interesting, was whether we could make an in-kind donation of property, because one of the challenges for this particular proposal is there's no identified site. So as it turns out, that's not an acceptable match. However, we do have two parcels, one that the fire station, the North Fire Station sits on, and then the expansion site that we had purchased. That's a little over an acre together. The city could, in the next CIP, fund the demolition of the fire station to free up a site. I'm not suggesting that we've done any kind of true, drawings or anything. We did a literal test fit of, could you fit a 10,000 square foot store and the parking? Could you fit that on the site? And so that's the extent of it, literally a block, like a little square or a rectangle and another rectangle, and it could fit. So we explored that, then turned out that we couldn't do the in-kind match. But what we'd like to do, if you agree, is offer the property on a probably a 25-year lease for $1 a year, the fire station property after the fire department moves out, of course. So that's all the things I wanted to share on the funding side. As the mayor mentioned, we need your direction, because then that will inform the ordinance that we prepare in our standard format for the budget amendment. And also, I would just say, we always have a funding agreement of some kind. If it's a grant like the ARPA, we have grant agreements. If it was a redevelopment, it was a TIF type of grant, then we'd have a redevelopment agreement. So we clearly are not going to be able to have a fully negotiated redevelopment agreement for you, but depending on the source of money and some of the other things that are evolving, we would like to, in the ordinance that we bring, at least call out what the sort of the most important issues that we would incorporate into a funding agreement that needs to accompany the actual, giving of the funds, just so that you, in anticipation, that you won't be surprised by some of those provisions. So that's all I have to share at the moment. I'm sure you have questions, and again, we have all the relevant people here to help answer.
Jan.
Yeah, thank you. This is awesome to have this much information. One thing is just a statement that if we can find a way without waiving our policies, it's a very strong preference. I think it's fiscally irresponsible for us. I mean, getting it on the table was a priority, but just to make that clear that it's not a good thing to do. With CDBG, so I got some of this as clarification in terms of the commitment. For the grant application, do we have to have that specificity of where it's coming from? Because if it takes a while to update the annual action plan, would it be possible for us to commit the funds now, then update the plan while the application is being processed, because that's going to take some time, and then have the CDBG funds available by the time that the project would be ready to go?
That I don't know. I don't know if that's acceptable. We've kind of ping-ponged a few ideas back and forth to find out, that's how we found out that the in-kind match wouldn't work. So I don't know, and I also don't know what the CDBG balance is that's uncommitted right now. I didn't get that piece of information. So if that's where, so I don't know that you'll be able to incorporate that into, although I could. Nick Olson is supposed to be here for the council or the committee meeting, so he may know. Or if you're listening, Nick, maybe bring that number with you.
The part 1, too, for the grant application, do we have to have where it's coming from? Just for reference, right? Of like, obviously, again, in terms of being fiscally responsible, we need to have a sense of where are we coming up with this money.
Right.
But just to clarify for the applicant, because of that time crunch too, if we can't have every minute piece figured out by next week, does that cause issues? Sorry, I'm looking at you because you got the application.
That I don't know. I don't know.
I believe the applicant is shaking her head that it probably would not cause an issue. So I think that's another piece, again, to be clear, there's Nick. We want to make sure that we're being responsible.
I can summon the staff.
But it is so time sensitive that I think, I appreciate this is a lot more information. I really appreciate all the staff working so quickly on this, but also recognizing that, if there's flexibility on our end, that gives us more time to make the most responsible decision of where the money's coming from.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't have the exact number of what's not committed. One of the things we do when we have prior program year funds that haven't been spent, we'll include that in the current year's action plan. So sort of the combination of this year's allocation as well as our previous year rollover, that's all wrapped up in our current action plan. And then as far as if we would be able to potentially commit funds prior to amending an annual action plan, I don't believe that would be consistent with HUD regulations. I believe that there needs to be the approved annual action plan with that project identified before a commitment could be made.
Mary Alice?
So I really like what Jay is suggesting, and keeping that in mind and keeping what Nick said in terms of not being able to commit. The two balances that are unrestricted, so to speak, is the general fund and the ARPA investment or interest amount. Those are the two that are the most bendable. We can do what we want to do with them. Of course, we're not going to, hopefully, amend our financial policies, so that leaves us with the ARPA interest. So I guess what I'm thinking is if we move forward next week with ARPA interest and we ask to update the plan for the CDBG action plan, and then whatever we're able to then take from CDBG funds can replace the ARPA interest money. I think we can swap some of that out. But a guarantee, of course, next week that we would have the $800,000 from the investment, and then we would only swap out the CDBG if we were able to make that amendment. To me, that seems the most logical way to go forward.
Chandra. Go ahead, Sharice, and then Chandra.
I'm almost like where Mary Alice is. I have an even bigger ask. The ARPA interest is what caught my ear as well. But I'm also thinking in terms of we do the ARPA interest in concert with the lease, property lease that we may be able to swing, which would also be helpful later on down the line regarding real estate purchases. That may be an option as well. In those two things together, that it may, in fact, help in regarding the amount that she has in her financials regarding the cost of real estate, and that would be one less. That would be one, because it has infrastructure there that would not have to be installed. It would be helpful regarding those particular items, and the simple fact that there can be a store and a modest parking lot placed on those particular parcels. Is
Just-
that a possibility?
Sharice, this is Carol. I'm just gonna explain what you were referring to. So in the pro forma, in terms of the cost of getting the store built and open, there's $100,000 for the acquisition of real estate. So that the lease for $1 would remove that requirement for the $100,000. The construction cost would still be necessary.
Okay, yeah, but not necessarily purchasing real estate as much as the cheap lease possibility that you also mentioned.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? Since we can't do an in-kind swap out, that maybe we could still possibly include with using the interest from the ARPA funds that could possibly be used, but also kind of take some of the costs out of what her expenses would be regarding the purchase of real estate.
Yes, that's correct.
And that may actually bring the numbers down even more, so that we can be more. If we keep that in mind, that's all I'm saying. It's an idea. I don't know if that would pass.
Well, what you're suggesting is just a combination of the leasing the fire station parcels plus the actual funding from the ARPA interest. Okay. Chandra.
I was essentially going to say the same thing, that using the interest funds sounds a lot easier, faster, quicker, and then leasing the old fire station spot for $1 or whatever. But I do like this Mary Alice's point of the CBDG funds, if it's available and we can swap it out and use less of the interest money. I think that would be a good idea as well. So.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Grace.
Diane?
Oh, we'll do Grace, and then we'll go to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you. Also appreciate the information and discussing some of these options. Just a quick clarifying question first. You said that we could get $800,000 just from the ARPA interest?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That I didn't realize that that was an option. For me, that would be the top option, since I don't know that we have any plans for it. I didn't even really realize that money existed. So that for me sounds like the best option. And also agree with some of the leasing options and see about that in combination. I don't agree with the swapping out CDBG stuff. I think if we have this ARPA money available, then we need to use that, and I think leave CDBG money alone where it already sits in the action plans, especially with what we've been hearing about last week and looking at the situation of number of people sleeping on the streets going into winter, and I think we have a lot of other priorities that we need to balance. So I think that we need to be aware of the general fund. We need to be aware of the CDBG money needs, and if we have a fund balance to spend down, I think we can find, there is the need. I think we can figure out how to spend that money, and that's also another priority. So agree with the ARPA interest money and the leasing option. And then I had a question about, we've been working on looking at an incentive for a grocery store in this area for a while as city staff and admin, and I'm wondering what was the current thing? Like, was there any incentive option that has been explored or currently an option for people?
what we had thought we would use at some point if we were dealing with a private entity was that we would propose some kind of rebate on sales taxes that wouldn't require an out-of-pocket expenditure. However, and what I think we had talked about at some point, probably during the mayor council goal discussion, was, and I think actually maybe Chris had actually suggested an amount that we should set aside as the incentive in that discussion. And where we were at that time was it wasn't about the amount; it was finding a grocery store developer. Let me just say that was interested. I mean, Andrea Rudy has worked on this literally for years, and we have an economic development check-in, and every week we get an update, and there's always something happening, and some new person that she's talked to, and we haven't been able to get any interest. So having a pot of money was secondary because we needed to know. We didn't even know what the order of magnitude was going to be. This is the first time that we've had a specific request to respond to, and that's why it's everybody has started sprinting to try to help. So we had never anticipated an out-of-pocket incentive. We weren't closed to it, but we had no idea what it might be. So asking for a set aside was just would have parked some money for something that might never have happened. So that's my answer to your question.
James?
Okay, I've got several things, and some of them involve questions, so bear with me. First of all, I want to add my voice to the list of people saying the ARPA interest money is the way to go on this. I am also supportive of a favorable lease model for the property associated with the old fire station that's going to be available at some point. I do have a question. If we have the $800,000 committed with the interest from the ARPA funds, does it add value to the grant proposal to have an official indication that we are interested in putting this land at a favorable lease agreement to the proposal? Because I would be supportive of that as well. I think that's a fabulous reuse of that land. But I don't know if we need to answer that question now unless it would actually add weight or merit to the grant application, and then in which case I think we should do something about it. Would it add?
Can I respond to that?
To say we have 800,000? Yeah.
I think it would, and I think it would for two reasons. One is the reason that Sharice was trying to identify, which is its cost avoidance for real estate acquisition. So that would be to the benefit, but also it's site control, right? And that's something, in a grant, when you don't have, if you don't know where the money's going to be spent, that for the entity that's evaluating proposals, they're like, well, these people don't even know. This is so still in the works. It's not. They haven't identified a site and they don't have control of the site. That would solve that problem. That's why when we started talking about it, we thought that, well, that would really strengthen the proposal.
Okay, so I would suggest that either be an option or a part of the thing that we address next week, because it would add value. When I'm looking at this in the timeline, I'm finding it hard to believe that any money would be spent on this project in the current fiscal year, just because of what I see from a timeline standpoint. Is there any reason to believe that we would be expending any money in this fiscal year for this project?
I don't think so. I agree with you. I don't think any money will be spent from our allocation in this fiscal year.
And so even though we don't appear to need it, what is the year cycle? I should know this because I've seen it 3 times, but what is the annual cycle for the CDBG plan?
We produce an action plan each year.
But when's it start and when's it end?
The program year begins July 1st and ends June 30th.
So if for whatever reason, and I'm not advocating for this, if for whatever reason we believe that CDBG funds would be useful and the council is on board with using it, we could put it in next year's plan and be able to spend money that way.
Another factor I do want to mention with CDBG before it can be committed to a project is an environmental review needs to be completed. If it's a project involving new construction, potentially that's kind of a higher level of review, which has a longer time span. So again, that would be another factor to consider if there's an imminent commitment of funds that needs to be made.
But my premise that we would not have to necessarily update this year's plan to go down that path if we saw a potential need for it. We could do it through next year's plan.
That's correct, if funds were going to be committed at a later date.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like that's a direction we would end up going, but it feels to me that we've been a little bit focused on how do we do that with this year's money, but I don't see how that's likely. I mean, I want it to happen as soon as we can possibly get it to happen, but just because of the timing of how the state takes these grants in and approves them and how long it takes to get, frankly, anything done these days, I don't think it's going to be in this fiscal year that dollars are going to be expended. So we should consider what we could do if we're looking into spending it next year as to what our options are. Thank you. That's everything.
Okay. Chris.
Just a general inquiry question. This is for Elizabeth Hannon. I saw in budget amendment number 2 that the general operating fund is going to have about $600,000 cushion before we get to the hard 25%. Am I remembering that right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. And I'm just offering that as one of our options as we try to cobble together an $800,000. But I'm like everybody else. I think that ARPA interest looks good.
Jaya.
So I have a few more thoughts just to complicate things a little bit. I think one is, yes, we need to have a plan, but I also want us to be thoughtful about how are we limiting ourselves if we're too specific, right? Because if we say, depending, on some of the requirements, for example, with CDBG, we're going to get into issues of supplanting, right? So if we say we're going to use ARPA and then we decide, actually, this is something that's allowable with CDBG and it's a good use of those funds, so we're not worried about lapsing funds. This would be a good use. I don't know, but I would imagine that there could become an issue of like, well, no, you can't use it for that purpose because you've already said you're going to use ARPA money, or ARPA interest money, rather. So I think that's a piece to consider. And I think also there was, like $10K that was like maybe usable for this purpose? Is that correct?
So in the 21-22 program year annual action plan, we had identified economic development as a project we were going to potentially use program funds for. That was the last year that we did that. So that would be the last year that, based on our current action plans, I believe we could draw from, like, at this point.
I think getting clarity on if we use CDBG funds for this project, what does that mean we're not doing, right? Like what is that, what is the impact in terms of social service grants, in terms of potentially addressing concerns around folks who are unhoused? That would be really important because while I 100% agree with the fact that we have this money from the interest is incredible and an opportunity, if we use it, it also means it's not there to continue to get interest, right?
Only once we actually spend it.
Once we actually,
While it's
yeah.
while it's just parked waiting, it will
It would continue to grow. But at some point, if we use this money, it's not there to continue to gain interest. So I think that's just my one note to think through, right? Of I think being willing to use these funds for that purpose is, I'm all in. Yes, let's definitely do that. But I think having a better understanding of, are there other funds that we could use without taking away from our opportunities to benefit our community other ways, especially if, there are caps in terms of how long you can keep rolling funds over. If this makes it so that we can use some of those monies that we want to be bringing into our community from federal funds that we would be at risk of losing or that we're not really using and we're not taking anything away from other projects by using it, I would say it's actually beneficial to use those funds first so we can keep these flexible funds continuing to build interest. So my recommendation would be to say for next week, we're making a commitment to providing the necessary funds. That's the important time-sensitive piece, right? As we're looking at next fiscal year's budget, because I agree with James, this is not going to be money that's going out the door this fiscal year, most likely. Then it gives us time to assess what are the options in terms of CDBG, what are the pros and cons, right? Would we be taking money away from other projects that we really want to make sure we're investing in? Or is this money that's just sitting there that we said we want to go to this kind of thing that we're not using, and if we don't use it sometime soon, we're going to lose it? So that's what I would just encourage. And yes, definitely to using the land as well. Sorry, and then I'll stop talking. Because even if it's not a match, even, for the reasons that you've already stated, I think it also shows the commitment of the city, right? So in terms of my experience with grant writing, if you can show that there are other vested parties that want a project to succeed, that matters.
I think what would be helpful if Angela knows, what documentation do you need to supply for the application in terms of the commitment? I assume they're not asking for a budget amendment. What do they need to see from us next week?
That's exactly what I'm texting our consultant about. But from just preliminary conversations, we just need a general letter of commitment.
Letter of commitment saying we're good for the 800,000.
Yes.
And lease on the property if that's something you want.
Yes.
So, okay.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that I don't want to foist anything on you that you don't want, but I figure land would be a good thing. So that simplifies things. That gives us time.
Diane?
Yes, James?
Just one question and one clarification. What is our current expectation for when we'll be done with the old fire station?
May is the hopeful date. June is what, May to June of 2025.
So a good timeline to match up with what's going on
It's
here.
perfect. Yeah, it's a perfect timeline.
And I do want to clarify for the public that the interest that we're talking about from the ARPA funds, that's from, we received like 2 allocations from the federal government very early on before we actually spent any ARPA funds. So it is as big as it is, the interest is as big as it is because we held all of our allocation for some period of time. I don't know if it was a year. And then we started allocating it and people starting to spend it. So it's not a big chunk of money as something itself that earns interest, but it will do that. It's a big chunk of money because we held, $12 million roughly from the beginning and have only been distributing it at least something about a year later after we received the actual allocations. Did I get that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes.
And the reason we held it is there was a very thoughtful process that we underwent to distribute those funds. So that's why it wasn't just shoved out the door. But
Yeah, it's not growing very fast now because we've spent a lot of the ARPA funds down. It's still growing. That's why it's not big enough exactly right this moment, but it will be soon. Holding on to it, it's only going to earn interest based on how big it is, not to the degree that it was when we received the original allocation.
got a hand, Mary Alice?
So, given this whole conversation, what I'm wondering is, it sounds to me like there is consensus in terms of, at first, we'll spend the ARPA interest money, and second, we would do the dollar lease for the property if that meets the needs. Since the applicant only needs a letter, I'm wondering if we have to go through the whole process of an ordinance, a budget amendment, or, right.
If you're comfortable with the letter of commitment from the city to the grantors, then that's what we can go with and get this done. Do we?
I would ask that we, at the very least, have a resolution. We may not need a budget amendment, but I would like to have something we vote on the record.
Gotcha. So we can prepare a resolution for next week.
And that resolution, at least in terms of the things that are consensus, is the first one, spending the ARPA interest money, and the second one, potentially leasing the property.
Do you want to get that specific?
Oh.
I personally would recommend not doing that because we're tying our hands, right? That would, again, I don't know the details of CDBG or some of our other grants, but generally speaking, if you have money that you say you're paying for something, then you say, well, actually, I want to use this new grant or this other grant that I have. If you've already said you have money to pay for it, that's supplanting. It's not allowable in most situations. So I think if we are passing a resolution saying we are committing the funds and the property, that's what to me makes sense. And I hear that of like, yeah, it's not as much money that we're making on interest, but if we're talking about going from 772 to 800,000, that's a grant to a social service agency. That's $30K, right? So if we don't need to use that more flexible funding, let's hold on to it. But again, I want to understand what we'd be giving up if we're using a CDBG. So I don't want to rush it. It sounds like we don't have to. So if we can make the commitment just to say, yes, we will provide the money, and we will continue to brainstorm how, or it'll be the next council that makes that decision because we will have already made that commitment. And I think we are all in agreement that the property piece is worth doing. That's my 2 cents is don't tie our hands to a point where we have to say, no, we can't use federal money instead of using flexible funds.
Carol?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jaya's take on this. The resolution should say we're going to commit $800,000, and if the property meets the needs of the project, we will offer it at a favorable lease. That's all it needs to say.
Technically, it probably should read up to $800,000. If the agency decides to give less than the $2.4 million requested, then the match is going to be proportionally less as well. So,
Mayor, I think perhaps the applicant might have some clarifying information from the state and has been attempting to raise her hand.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, you are precisely right. I do have clarification just from our consultant, and this is exactly what he says. It will have to outline, the letter will have to outline the amount that they intend to provide, but shouldn't require a listing of sources.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
Carol, you had something.
I just want to be sure that I'm hearing things right. I thought I understood you to say, Jaya, that you didn't want even a resolution. Did I hear that wrong?
No, I think a resolution's great. I just wouldn't commit where the money is coming from, just so we're not tying our hands in terms of, what's going to be the best use of different funds.
That's fine. I just wanted to be, I do think it's important to have a resolution that outlines the primary terms of this, because then there'll be no misunderstandings, and if votes need to take place by a new council, they'll know what this council committed to. And while the mic is on, I'm just going to say, even though you think it dovetails really nicely when the firefighters would move out and when they might need the property, if we're going to demolish it, that takes months. So, and if we need to do environmental work, that could take longer. So I mean, I think it can all work out, but it's not a like, here's the key and everything's good. It will take time if we're going to do the demolition.
That's why the resolution needs to say that we're offering it if it makes sense, right? Because the actual project may determine that the shape of that property or its location doesn't fit in some way. So we're making the offer. It may not pan out that way.
That's important.
I have
Sharice.
I have a question too regarding the an environmental study, as far as someone had said something about that. I think it was Mr. Nichols. The other thing that other piece of that is also responsibility for that study would that fall on us or would that fall on Angela? And therefore, the cost of the environmental study is also something I'm thinking about.
Nick, you want?
I'd say it varies from project to project. A lot of the time, staff are capable of completing the HUD's environmental review requirements. For some more complex projects like larger multifamily developments that we've committed program funds to, those have been things where the developer has needed to contract with a third party for an environmental assessment. But it really varies from project to project, and things like whether you're acquiring an existing property or constructing a new property on an undeveloped parcel of land. So it varies.
Well, and I asked that because of the simple fact that will also affect her application process as to whether or not she would have to include that cost as in lieu of maybe purchasing real estate. And that's why I was asking, where that would fall, because I'm also thinking about her application process on the grant.
I think one thing that we should recognize is there's still an awful lot to evolve about this. So, one of the things that we've discovered on other property is, and the expansion site that we bought that's next to the Circle K, I'm not saying please nobody say that I said there was any environmental contamination. However, sometimes there is when you're proximate to a gas station. So there's things that are unknowns. There's a lot that's unknown because the store hasn't been laid out. There's been there's a lot of unknowns. So I don't know that particular unknown needs to be solved right now just because it's bubbled up. That's something that we can sort out if and when we need to.
Okie dokie.
Grace.
Thank you. Just wanted to echo Jaya's point there, and I agree and kind of take back the blanket statement of not using CDBG funds, because I think that is important. And remembering that, I think, is that the one that's limited only 15% for social services? But I mean, I think that would be the important piece.
There is a cap for social services, yes.
That would be the important piece there, is especially looking at some of our other priorities, and with winter sheltering, I think that would be a really important piece to hear from community development and some of our other community partners, and looking at this money and say what CDBG money is maybe already allocated and can be used for those things versus not. And if we have a limitation on those allowable uses, then I think it does make sense, as Jaya was suggesting, actually use some of that CDBG that is for more capital investments, and then use that flexible ARPA money in other places where we need it. So I am interested in hearing more on that, and seeing about a balance between maybe CDBG funds that we're having issues spending other places and some of that ARPA interest money. And it seems like what I'm understanding is there's maybe two parts to this now, like the first part being the letter of commitment, and that saying just generally 25% match up to $800,000, and possibly that offer of the land leasing option. And then maybe, it sounds like separately coming behind that would be the resolution just kind of codifying some of the terms and where we'd be pulling that money. Because it sounds like we might not need a whole budget amendment, but I think it is important to say where this money comes from so that a whole next set of people aren't held for it. No? Why not?
No. Let me tell you what we're planning on bringing next week. Nick is now regretting that Braden is on vacation, but you're the man, and I know you can do it, and to answer all the questions. But it actually doesn't need to be decided yet. That's not as urgent. So what we're going to bring next week is we're going to bring a resolution that is as flexible in terms of, we're not going to talk about where the money's going to come from, but we are going to make a commitment to money. We're going to talk about offering up to $800,000. We're going to talk about offering the property for lease, if that would work out, and then some of the other broad parameters, like one of the parameters that you will see in the resolution is that our 800 doesn't go to the project if they don't get the grant, because then there's no, it's things like that. So we'll have those broad strokes outlined in this resolution, and then there's lots of time subsequent to that to talk about the issues related to CDBG, which I think are good, and I also think it's a good refresher to just talk about CDBG in general, because our allocation was already reduced, and Lord knows what's going to happen in January. So I think it's just a good idea to just have it all in mind of what we have and what we usually expect and may not have reason to continue to expect. So we'll follow on with that, but the urgency is not the same as getting the resolution next week.
Okay, so there will be a resolution prepared for next week's agenda to be voted on. That'll be an action item at the next council meeting, and then we'll draft a letter of commitment that would go with that resolution to be included in the grant packet. Everybody on board with that? Thumbs up? Okay. All right.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All righty. We have our next steps. And with no further business before this council meeting, we will stand adjourned and move on to the committee of the whole meeting as soon as possible. Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
All right, good evening once again. This is the Committee of the Whole. I am standing in for Charisse, who is coming here remotely. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti,
Here.
Miss Bishop, Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
The next item is approval of minutes of the previous meetings. There aren't any right now. Are there any additions to the agenda? Presentations and public input. Just a reminder, this is the Committee of the Whole. If you would like to address the committee, please step up to the microphone and state your name for the record.
Good evening. I'm Eric Sachs. The proposed ordinance, number 2024-11-34, an ordinance to amend the Urbana zoning ordinance with additional lot area and width requirements for certain uses, is not merely a clarification of the current code, but rather it is a large and substantive change to zoning that will negatively impact our city. The current zoning ordinance requires duplexes to be on larger and wider lots than single-family homes, but the proposed ordinance would eliminate lot area and width requirements for building on all existing lots. City staff's stated goal of the proposed ordinance is to allow duplexes to be built on all R2 and R3 lots, regardless of the lot size. This is a huge change from long-standing precedent. For more than 50 years, our zoning ordinances have specifically prohibited the building of duplexes on small lots. In 1970, Urbana's third zoning ordinance established lot area and width requirements for new duplex lots as 9,000 square feet / 80 feet. In 1990, the amendment, our current regulation, requires 6,000 square feet / 60 feet. These specific lot minimum requirements for duplexes were intentional. It was understood that housing too many people on too small of a lot would be disadvantageous to the residents of the duplexes and to the broader community. I would also point out that there's no barrier to a prospective builder of a duplex to combining lots, either in part or whole, to meet the minimum requirements. And this is very common in the older parts of West Urbana for not just duplexes, but for houses in general. Last week, you heard many residents of Urbana tell you that the proposed ordinance is bad and that they do not want this change. I and many others believe that the proposed ordinance would greatly reduce affordability of housing, especially home ownership in Urbana. Moreover, this comes at a time when affordability of housing is a serious issue locally. Given that the large number of lots that would be affected by the proposed ordinance, 38% in R3 and 51% in R2, the changes it would bring can be expected to be large. Thus, the proposed ordinance would allow and encourage R2 and R3 neighborhoods to be radically altered, and not for the better. Moreover, Urbana's older neighborhoods with the smaller lots and houses would be disproportionately affected. Notably, the proposed ordinance is inconsistent with Goal 1 of the Comprehensive Plan, preserve and enhance the character of Urbana's established residential neighborhoods. Yet, no cost-benefit analysis has been presented, and indeed staff described no compelling benefits to the city or its residents. During the previous meeting, on November 12th, Council asked city staff for more data on how other remaining zoning requirements, such as floor area ratio, setbacks, and parking, might limit the proportion of existing R2 and R3 lots on which duplexes could be built under the proposed ordinance. While such data will be interesting to consider, it may be a moot point. Given that city staff clearly stated that their new goal is to allow duplexes on all existing R2 and R3 lots, it is only logical that in the future we can expect new requests to change requirements for floor area ratio, setbacks, and/or parking until this goal is fully achieved. As a matter of process, Council would be ill-advised to make major changes to zoning in a piecemeal fashion and without a clear consensus as to what are the goals and what are the benefits, and without carefully considering what is the cost
of some shady back door deal in a smoky room between a developer. Everything's been very transparent. I did the application, I submitted it to the Plan Commission, it's been reviewed publicly, and so on. The economics of development, there's just simply no way to justify demolishing a house that has its small-scale developers. Developers from Atlanta aren't flying in to develop duplexes in the city of Urbana. And this is the scale of housing that in a lot of our neighborhoods central to downtown, older neighborhoods, we don't have that tax abatement incentive. We don't have the sales tax abatement on building materials. So how do you say buy a really bad house for $30,000, pay $10,000, $15,000, maybe $20,000, demolish it if there's a basement? You don't know if that sewer is gonna have to be. Is that a bad thing? No. I think it's good for the person who makes it, and it's good for the occupant. The idea that everyone needs to live to some standard or that is established by one neighborhood in our city is disturbing. And, you know, this was voted on 5-0 by Plan Commission. 3 of those 5 people live in that neighborhood of Woona. It's indefensible. There was reservations on the Plan Commission, but they can't defend it.
To achieve more rental units to make housing here more affordable. But I also want other people with limited incomes to be able to achieve homeownership as well. And it's been a challenge. It was almost a year of striving and not being able to land an offer that was accepted in my price range. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm back. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had a committee of the whole tonight. I'm so sorry. So I would like to speak again on this issue. My name is Adani Sanchez. I'm in Champaign, but I really want to encourage more people to come to this community, both Champaign and Urbana, and that means opening up our neighborhoods so that there are a variety of options that people have in every neighborhood. I want duplexes next door to me. I want apartments next door to me, because when we have new families who are just starting out, they're not interested in staying in an apartment anymore, but they're willing to kind of go the next step, but they can't quite afford housing costs in Woona. So it's going to be really difficult. It took me 2 years to find a place that I could possibly afford, and that was not, that was through very much a lucky chance. It is not usual. It's been very difficult to find housing here, especially housing that's affordable. So when we're talking about what we want the future of this community to look like, it's incredibly important to have options that are available to everyone and not to roll up the ladder behind us and close the gates. So that part of that means having a variety of housing for people who might not be able to afford a whole single family home. Anytime we're talking about neighborhoods where there's only single family homes, that means you only want people who can afford a single family home to live there. And so when you're saying you don't want other types of housing, you're saying I don't want people who can pay less rent than I can. So I just want that to take into consideration. These are homes. These aren't eyesores. These are homes for people to live that's going to make their life more stable. So when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about it at all levels, and hopefully you'll take that into consideration for the future of our community. Thank you.
All right, if there's nobody else who would like to address the committee of the whole, I believe, Sharice, you wanted to read a letter?
Yes. This letter is from Melinda Carr. Dear Mayor Marlin and members of the Urbana Committee of the Whole, I, Assistant Pastor Melinda Carr, Interim President of North End United, am writing on behalf of the North End United group, including residents of Carver Park subdivision and other surrounding neighborhoods, which are historically African American. At tonight's meeting on November 18th, 2024, the City of Urbana will be approving resolutions to accept 2 grants for Hope Village, Inc., a tiny homes project for medically fragile individuals, from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, in the amounts of $1.2 million and $250,000. Housing for the homeless is a good cause. What we oppose is that you did this without fully addressing concerns of neighboring residents, including a pending City of Urbana Human Relations Commission complaint and an unresolved complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office. The neighboring residents of Carver Park subdivision and other surrounding neighborhoods also tried filing a complaint with the Illinois Department of Human Rights and has filed a complaint with the City of Champaign Human Relations Commission. Following is a summary of the issues the group has raised with governing bodies in both cities in opposition to the location and future programming of Hope Village. The group alleges the cities have failed in their most important role by relinquishing or giving up their fiduciary responsibilities to other entities instead of doing what is in the best interest of the residents. Lack of community involvement in the planning process and rejecting an alternative design plan to alleviate neighboring residents' concerns was as outlined in the existing ordinance 2023-07-023 PDF, page 4, section 1, number 2. The plan is responsive to the concerns of neighboring residents. Prohibit intrusion to the existing infrastructure and allow access through the previously identified address due to increased traffic and noise pollution, public safety risks surrounding the location of a retention pond, and other economic impacts. The Urbana Plan Commission publicly acknowledged the inadequate planning process. The Illinois Attorney General's office is still reviewing a closed meeting held on December 7th, 2023, as to whether it took place in violation of the Open Meetings Act. See the video starting at 3944 mark Plan Commission meeting and article Plan Commission holds questionable closed meeting. Urbana, Illinois, check CU. In light of these issues, we are asking the City of Urbana Committee of the Whole to postpone the discussion to approve the resolutions until the next City Council meeting out of respect for the regular process and include future allowances that will address the concerns of the neighboring residents in an equitable manner. Best regards, Assistant Pastor Melinda Carr.
All right, thank you. I have 2 additional items to read into the record. This one is for Miriam Keep. I'm writing in support of the proposed zoning amendment to allow duplexes on smaller lots. I'm in favor of this measure that will increase the number of homes available, increase the diversity of housing options in the transient-friendly areas, and encourage infill development. I moved to Urbana about a year and a half ago to start a job at the university. My experience has been enriched by finding affordable rental housing in a neighborhood where I can easily walk and bike to the university and downtown amenities, which has enabled me to build a community here and to get involved in community events and volunteer programs. The housing options were limited, but I got lucky, and I know many others who have struggled to find convenient housing. For me, living in a transient-friendly, well-connected neighborhood has made Urbana a great place to live, and I want this experience to be available to others. The proposal before the council is ultimately a very moderate measure to encourage more housing development. The demand for housing is clear, and I urge the council to support this measure that is also aligned with the city's own goal to promote growth within the city's borders. The next one is, let's see here, Susan Appel. Hopefully I said the last name right. From the Advocacy Committee of the Preservation and Conservation Association of Champaign County, PACA, concerning ordinance number 2024-11034, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning ordinance, updated section 6.3 for clarity and to remove additional lot area and width requirements for certain uses, plan case number 2493T24. At first blush, the notion of fixing up a few dilapidated properties in the East Washington Street area seems welcome, an aid to the city's tax base and the neighborhood, as a developer has worked in this area for some time. A quick leap of faith was made, however, from Washington Street to the entire city, where R2 and R3 zoning exist, to cast an eye on any lot in any neighborhood which is smaller than 60 feet wide. From Savannah Green to Landis Farms and Doreen Miller Drive, any lot which has seemed protected from the increased density of a duplex, 8 unrelated dwellers, could be subject to developer scrutiny. Many narrow lots were platted as a response to the very real post-World War II housing shortage. More recently, smaller lots have expressed their desire for more affordable home ownership, a toehold on the path to equity stakes. A commercial loan is a different animal from a traditional home loan. If you have one commercial loan, it is easier to get another, and so on. A developer can move more nimbly than a family seeking a first home loan through a bank. Many families are frustrated by the disappearance of opportunities as the fixer-uppers are snatched away by those with a large line of credit. City staff contends that they present this language to the council at the unanimous behest of the Plan Commission. But in the past few weeks, staff has asserted that you should ignore unanimous decisions of the Plan Commission when they do not suit the staff's desires. Without local reporting to newspapers, newscasts, social media outlets, and neighborhood listservs, it is difficult for the citizenry to keep tabs on the decisions of those elected and appointed to office. Discussion of the proposal should have begun at the Plan Commission meetings. Without the activism of one WUNA list member, this case might have sailed through the council unnoticed outside of these walls. PACA asks you again to postpone a decision this evening to allow time for public and official discussion. A common concern voiced to PACA and at last week's meeting of the Council Committee of the Whole has been a lack of illustrations, specifically examples of duplexes and shared lot line dwellings on small lots. While such illustrations are expected at the current meeting, neither the public nor the council members have had advance exposure to those to contemplate them before a decision is made. But there is no need to rush. Time is, in fact, plentiful to consider what could make a strong impact on the character of the city of Urbana. Doesn't the city deserve that? For that reason, we seek time for public and council education and input before any final decision is made. Please table this proposal tonight and come back to it when more complete evidence has been made available. All right, and with that, we're going to end our public input segment. The next item on the agenda is a staff report for use cycle options. Is Tim here? Tim and Scott.
Good evening, Council. Back to discuss use cycle again with you. We've taken some time to kind of churn through a little bit more logistics and specifics on different types of rate adjustments that may warrant consideration, and get some more feedback from you guys on this going forward. One reason we're talking tonight is because one of our items is included on the budget amendment within the business items this evening. The tax rate adjustments will be discussed at a subsequent meeting from here with either some options or some input from you folks tonight on that.
Thank you for that introduction. So, the two critical questions before us tonight that we want to share some information on and get some feedback from council on are, first, what is the level of service we want to pursue? And this impacts the contracts we're going to sign and also the fees we're going to establish for residents. So the options are weekly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in every other week. The second question for us to consider tonight is how we want to adjust rates to pay for the current costs of providing this service. And we're going to detail, and Tim specifically is going to detail three different options. One is, the bite the bullet option. We'll adjust the fee to pay for the entire, current cost in one fell swoop. The second is spreading the increase across 3 years and using fund balance. And in both of these instances, in the future, we will just incrementally, or we're recommending just an incremental increase in the fees that residents pay according to inflation. And then the third option would also be a slow step up in the fee, but that would be smaller steps by rolling out a carry-out bag fee subsidy. So that's something in mayor and council goals. So some considerations on the service level for curbside recycling use cycle. This curbside has been weekly since the 1990s, really since the modern iteration of the program. Cost of the service is really still quite affordable. It's comparable to other communities. It's much cheaper than what a household's going to pay for garbage service. The volume of recyclables has increased significantly since the 1990s. First there was, Amazon boxes, cardboard boxes, and then there was the plastic containers for food service delivery. And so things have changed over the years, and there's just more volume. Some of the impacts of reducing service from weekly to every other week are, well, one, we would spend less per year, but the marginal cost of each collection would actually be higher. So that's an interesting trade-off to think about. We are confident that, the second item here, we're confident that there are some number of households, impossible to speculate on how many, which are going to find that one 60-gallon cart collected every other week is not sufficient for all the recyclables they generate, and they will probably just put the balance in the garbage. And that leads to the last one here. We're probably going to see some materials that people can't hold over 2 weeks just be placed in the garbage.
So I'll jump in here, and we've tried to just, you could do this through a number of different iterations. So we tried to pinpoint a few that made sense to us and then kind of compare them across each other. So the top chart is if we maintain weekly curbside service still. And I guess one thing I'll say is we're really just talking about curbside here. There is an adjustment necessary for the multifamily service, but incrementally it's much more insubstantial than this. The doing one immediate step in that is a 20% increase. Steps is less than a 10% increase versus these are, in the vicinity of 100% or more in some cases. So I'll just walk through them real quick and then we'll get through it and then you guys can ask questions. We can go back to this and drill down on this more. But just looking at the first option, doing one major step increase in effective January 1, fiscal year 25, within 2.5% inflation projected thereafter would lead us going from a current rate of $3.25 to $7.65 beginning January 1 and then incrementing at 2.5% beyond that. The second option, trying to step this in to limit its impacts on our users. We tried to kind of do that in a balanced way where we would go to $5.25 in January 1, 25, $7 in fiscal year 26, and then $8.75 in fiscal year 27. That's a jump of $2 the first year, $1.75 the second year, $1.75 the third year, and then we'd be able to increment by some inflationary factor thereafter. And then the third option was looking at the single-use carryout bag subsidy with smaller steps and then inflation. And as you can see there, if we were, and some of that is projecting what kind of revenue we think that would actually generate. That is an unknown. It could generate a lot. It could generate very little. This is based on an assumption, I think, of $250,000 in revenue in year one for that. And what we've seen with those is other people that have done those is it kind of has a half-life. So after the first year, you have a bunch of change, so a big drop-off, and then a big drop-off until a point you get down to something that's going to stabilize and maintain there. But the thoughts being is, if we're able to stand that up year one, we're not going to have quite as big of an impact on people. Year two, basically we can draw out those steps longer and subsidize with that because that will not be a sustainable revenue source. We know it's built to go away, but it could be something that could, help soften the blow of this, and then simultaneously at a point in time it stabilizes if we don't feel like we need to subsidize it anymore, and we can do that within just the use cycle rates alone. We could repurpose those funds for some other use or instance. Just comparing those numbers to, going from weekly to every other week, the major step, instead of $7.65 to maintain weekly service, we'd go to $4.90. The 3-year steps, instead of $5.25, $7, and $8.75, we would go to $4, $4.75, and $5.50. And then the single-use carryout bag subsidy, instead of $4.75, $6.25, $7.50, and $8.75, we'd be at $3.75, $4.25, $4.75, and $5.25. And I feel like I just said a lot of numbers, but we'll come back to that and drill down on it more. But we've tried to highlight this so that you can see them side by side for comparison, highlighting the step increases in yellow, and then when the inflationary increases kick in blue. We actually went ahead and carried this out through a 10-year projection just to try to ensure it's stable. And with the structures that we've built here, we would project maintaining about a 10% fund balance year over year to kind of handle fluctuations through the 10-year projection in that regard. Now, our contract for the current services that we would be looking to award is a 5-year contract. So after 5 years, there's potential that if there's more substantial changes at that time, that we may be revisiting this. But the hope would be that if we can get to something that's sustainable, we can just maintain with inflationary adjustments, such as hopefully the cost of those services as well.
So what we're recommending and what we would like some feedback on is, one, on the first question, maintain weekly service. This is, I think, an expectation of our residents. It's certainly what they're used to. As I mentioned before, still reasonably affordable. maintains a high level of environmental sustainability in the sense of, I think we're going to collect more, we're going to recycle more materials if we have weekly service. On the second question, staff is recommending that we pursue a carry-out bag fee, sometimes called a plastic bag fee as it is here on this slide, and the smaller multiple step up of the fee for residents, and then an inflation, an annual inflation-related increase in the fee thereafter. So something that makes this particularly relevant is there's really there's not very many processors of recycling materials that accept plastic carryout bags in curbside collection anymore. That can only be done with a totally manual hand sort, and that's not really where any of most of the market is these days. So we're not accepting that in curbside in the future. By having these smaller steps, it's a little more digestible and easy for folks to budget for. It's viable to implement within probably a FY 2026 fee schedule. Just to flesh out a little bit what we mean by a carryout bag fee, there's been a confluence of terms and conditions on these that you'll see in other ordinances in the state, which is to say all the other cities have nearly identical ordinances who have done this. Most of them are at a 10-cent per bag. There is a ton of exceptions. So every exception you might be thinking of, well, what about that? That wouldn't make sense. That's already, others who have been crafting and recrafting these ordinances in Illinois have thought of that, and you'll probably see that if we bring a draft at some point in the future. Most cities are at a 5,000 square foot threshold. There's one at 3,000, there's one at 10,000, so there's flexibility there. We think that this is probably going to impact less than 100 businesses in Urbana. It may be such that through the data we can collect, we send a letter to 150 businesses and 75 call us and say, I don't think this applies to me, and it turns out they're right. But we think it'll probably end up affecting less than 100 businesses. Most of the cities that are engaging in these ordinances are doing a pretty simple public engagement rollout. They let the affected businesses know, of course. They do some broadcasting of the issue and what the impact is for residents, and carry on. We're estimating, just really for putting together some numbers, $250,000 year one revenue. It's pretty hard to tell because this is based on people's behavior at the grocery store, what that year one revenue will really be. Could be 100,000 more than that, could be 100,000 less than that. But what we are confident about is year two and thereafter, it's going to be a lot less because people are going to change their behavior. And that's kind of the point of this type of policy, is that you incentivize, less single-use waste. We think that we can start the work on this in January of 2025, and in fiscal year 2026 have this in the fee schedule.
So just kind of putting a pin in what has to happen, and we haven't talked about the budget amendment so much here, but we do have available fund balance currently that's not within this fiscal year's budget. What we're asking for in the budget amendment would be to pull funds out of the fund balance so that we have funds available to initiate a contract to maintain curbside recycling services. If it were to remain weekly, we need $300,000, which is the ask within the budget amendment. If it were to go every other week, we still need $200,000. So that would be the caveat there. But for the budget amendment, that would tell us we would have budget authority to execute a contract to maintain service when our other contract ends. Just a reminder on that, the current bids that we have are good through, I think, December 19th, so that's kind of the time sensitivity of getting the budget amendment passed. The second part of this is really evaluating the models for maintaining the service and the rate structure to support it. We've made our recommendation. Obviously, we're willing to take feedback from you folks and, modify from there, or, bring back an ordinance in early December to, solidify whatever your guys' opinions are on the rate structures moving forward. And that's all we've got. So if you guys want to go somewhere and chat about something, please feel free to direct me as necessary, and we'll try to answer any questions we can.
Chris?
Okay, so the numbers are per month, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Because you didn't say it, and I just wanted the public to
Yep.
know that. Yep, per month. Has there been any measurements made on how businesses feel about a bag tax, those less than 100 businesses? Any idea?
Not at this point. That would be we would do some community outreach as one of the first initial things. Right now, we're just trying to distill the list down of people that we think would be impacted based on what others are doing. And then once we get that list kind of weaned down to who we think would be affected, plus, some reasonable estimate beyond that to make sure we're not missing somebody, we would reach out with more information on it, probably have some type of public engagement here at a council meeting or something, that if they wanted to come have a discussion to have their voices heard, they could do so.
Yeah. And I guess the retailer would be responsible for tabulating and cutting us the check, how many bags left their store, and then the consumer is just being charged that 10 cents per bag that we're carrying to the car. Is that
correct?
How that works? Okay. 10 cents a bag, generally, but we haven't fixed on that. We're just...
Correct. That's kind of a standard that we've seen in a lot of places that has led to impactful change.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just doing some quick numbers here. The weekly curbside, if I use the fiscal year 30, the difference is $39 a year at the existing rate and $103 a year at the rate in fiscal year 30. Is that correct?
That seems about right.
And
yeah.
then for the every other week, it goes from 39, which is existing, to 66 the same year.
Yes.
So you're 30. Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted their square footage for us in Urbana. There's been drafts of this resolution and some of the details, as you're aware of, from the Sustainability Advisory Commission that have already been recognized in the council goals. So just wanted to remind us all that there's been years of work and planning in this already, and I hope that we can utilize some of that stuff too.
Yep.
Chandra.
I would just going to say that I like the idea of sticking with the weekly service for the very reasons that you listed before, making sure that, service is still accurate and the point of recycling is maintained. I do like the smaller steps, sort of like Grace said, like sometimes it's a big sticker shock when, prices jump really quickly for households. So, and then to roll in the carry-out bag fee with that, I think is a good idea as well, so.
Yeah, I'd echo the, forming consensus, that I think the recommendation makes a lot of sense for all the reasons that you've stated. And I do want to reinforce what Grace said, though, that this is not out of the blue, right? This is something that actually has been brought up in council goal setting, and we've had community participation, and the Sustainability Advisory Commission has been talking about this, and it's unfortunate that this is what needs to prompt it, but I do think it's important to recognize all the work that has gone into positioning us to be able to, I know it's still going to be a lot of work for city staff, but I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of work has already been done on this that positions us to be able to move forward with this. So I think the plan makes sense, and it's in line with the stated values of the city.
So I'm going to have to disagree with my colleagues. I would rather see us go to the every other week curbside. I do agree with the single-use carryout. I also rather just go with one big step and then just make it standard so people could plan. It's going to be roughly $5 or roughly $8 every month. It's a little bit easier than keep seeing your bills increasing. But that's my preference. It sounds like I'm kind of outvoted right now. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I think that going from $39 to $100 is quite a big jump versus $39.66. So those are my 2 cents. Sharice, do you have anything you want to add?
I kind of agree with what you just said. I do want to understand the single carryout better. What he was saying. Being on the phone, I don't have. I can see the pictures and stuff on YouTube, but I'm not quite understanding some things. So if he could, the single-use carryout bag subsidy, I would like to understand that better.
Sure. So the concept is at the point of purchase, there's a cost to using those single-use bags at the end of the shopping counter, and the cost is pretty nominal, but it's just enough that some folks will remember to bring a reusable bag the next time.
So you're talking about charging a particular fee
Exactly.
per plastic bag. Okay, and that's because you said something about a lot of recycling places do not recycle single-use bags anymore. Something
Correct.
Okay.
It does still happen as a drop-off recycling. It's particularly in front of certain brands of grocery stores. But less.
Yeah.
It's almost gone completely from a curbside collection perspective.
Yeah,
Okay, so like, what do you think the cost per single-use plastic bag might be added to someone's grocery bill?
Yeah. So that what most cities in Illinois are doing is 10 cents per bag.
Okay.
Think about if you've
so-
been to Aldi, it's a very similar model, but extrapolating that everywhere else, and that fee comes back to the city instead of Aldi selling you a bag for its use.
Yeah. What I've had to do several times is just pay 12 cents for a paper bag there.
Yep.
Sometimes. And so you're talking about basically the same thing regarding. And most of the time, of course, I also take bags into Aldi because I'm not going to carry stuff out in the box. But what I'm saying is that, so you're saying like at Walmart, at Meijer, at whatever other place, because when you go to Sam's, there are no bags. You have to kind of take your own or use a box. At Aldi's, it's basically the same thing unless you buy a reusable bag or a paper bag.
Exactly.
Okay, so it would be one of those situations where at Walmart, Meijer, and other places that use the single-use bags, they would pay an additional fee per bag, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Right? Okay, to carry their groceries out. So are we trying to change the psychology of our usual shopper to start bringing their own bags?
Exactly. So, the bags have a cost, but you're not charged for them, right? It's just built into the cost of other groceries. And so people, when they appear to be free, people will use more of them. When there is a small cost, people will change their behavior and use less of them. And so the idea is, no one likes the image of a plastic bag against a chain link fence, a plastic bag, covering a storm drain. And so if some small, behavior change strategies such as, affixing a cost to a thing that does actually have a cost, will reduce that, that's a benefit.
Okay, I understand that now. And so the curbside service to recycle such bags is going to increase? Is that what you're saying?
No, the ability to recycle these plastic single-use bags curbside is going away completely. That won't be accepted in U-Cycle, as it's not accepted in essentially every curbside recycling program in the country.
Okay, so I have another question, because I often use the single-use bags to put crushed bottles in and so on and so forth. You no longer want that to happen. That's what
So yes, yeah. So we won't be accepting those single-use grocery bags in the curbside container at all.
Okay. So just throw them in the recycling bin and be through with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's best if all the materials in that commingled or mixed recycling container are loose.
And what about okay, and this sounds kind of, for lack of a better word, stupid. So what if you use garbage? What if one uses like regular plastic garbage bags? You don't want that either.
Correct. We don't accept any other plastic films in the curbside recycling container. That's a pretty standard across recycling programs in the U.S.
Okay. I just want to understand that and kind of get it out there so other people will also understand. No bags.
No bags.
Period.
I think that's part of what lends itself to maybe being a very logical subsidy for this, because industry-wide, the ability to do so is also gone. So kind of a...
Well, that may be a slogan that you use for public education, no bags. Because I know ultimately, I would try to do whatever is more convenient for the recycling people. And what I've been doing is bagging things up as I go. But if that is going to be the ongoing policy where you don't want any bags, I think it would suit you, well, also to kind of do a public education PSA or something like that. No bags in the recycling.
Definitely.
Of any kind. So I just wanted to put that there after, of course, understanding more of what you were saying. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. James, do you have any questions?
I don't have any specific questions. I will say that I am with the majority on this, which is I would prefer to see weekly pickup continue because I think it's going to, if we don't do that, it's going to add to the waste stream. And I am supportive of getting this bag fee up and running as soon as possible.
All right, if nobody else.
I think that,
Sharice, did you have?
I was just going to say, yeah, isn't that something that we had discussed also before regarding cutting down on plastic bags in the city? We had a presentation from some U of I students.
Yes, I believe
regarding
Grace invited some U of I students and has also done some work on the sustainability committee in terms of a bag fee.
Okay, so this is something that U-Cycle will implement with the grocery chains and so on and so forth?
Yeah, Public Works and Finance will work together to stand this up.
Fiscal year 2026, so about a year and a half.
Really, we'll start in January 2025
Right.
and try to get it stood up by fiscal year 26.
Okay, all right. Okay, no further questions. There's nothing except for the budget amendment that we need to go over. Is that correct?
No, I think the budget amendment, Elizabeth will touch on all that stuff, and I'll be available if you have additional questions at that time. The budget amendment, like I said, that you'll see later, it's for the $300,000 that's in that is pulling from fund balance that would allow us to pay the entirety of the contract once the service switches over in April. Otherwise, we don't have adequate fiscal year 25 budget for that. It is sitting in fund balance and available, but we have to pull it into the budget to have budget authority to execute a contract.
And just to be clear, when you say fund balance, you're talking about the general fund.
I'm talking about the U-Cycle fund.
U-Cycle fund,
U-Cycle
okay.
fund has somewhere in the vicinity of $450,000 currently. That will draw it down to about $150,000 remaining in fund balance, and we would have enough money to pay the bills with a new contract maintained at weekly service.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Next up is unfinished business, which is ordinance number 2024-11034, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning ordinance, update section 6.3 for clarity and to remove additional lot area and width requirements for certain uses. Plan case number 2493T24. Kevin.
Okay, good evening. All right, so last week at the Committee of the Whole, Council had asked us for some additional information. It being a pretty short week, we were able to provide some of that in the memo that you all received, but I'm going to go through some more things tonight. So let me just pull this out. Okay, those specific things, just real quick, there was a question about the role that the current comprehensive plan draft Imagine Urbana played in evaluating the proposal. There was a request for a chart showing sort of before, get this closer to me, before and after regulations for duplexes. There's a request for some illustrations for different development scenarios and sort of how the proposed amendment would affect those scenarios. Those I'm not going to go through. Those have been provided by the applicant, Mr. Huber, so I'm going to ask him to come up in a bit to go through those. And then the final request was for a static zoning map, and those are provided in your packets. So I'm going to just go through these bits here. Okay, so regarding the role of Imagine Urbana in evaluating this proposal, our staff report, neither the staff report or the Plan Commission recommendation used Imagine Urbana because that's still in draft form. So we relied on our current comprehensive plan. If you look back, the Plan Commission staff report identified several goals and objectives from the 2005, the current comprehensive plan, to support the text amendment. And those are also in your committee packet, along with several additional objectives that we pulled out as well that supported the amendment. So in relying on the 2005 comprehensive plan, so really the policy underpinning for this proposed text amendment isn't new. There's ample evidence in the current plan to support the text amendment. That said, as currently drafted, Imagine Urbana would also support the proposed text amendment. I'm not going to go through a bunch of things, but I will point out that big idea number one from Imagine Urbana is that Urbana is a place for everyone. We feel this amendment gets at that. Okay, on to the chart. So for current and proposed regulations for duplexes in the R2 and R3 districts, this lays out the changes of which only the top 3 rows here have any of the changes. So currently, if you have a plat, if you have a lot that was platted before 1970, you have to meet this minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet and 60 feet wide for a duplex in either district. If it's platted after 1970, it has to be a minimum of 9,000 square feet and 80 feet wide. The proposal is that for existing lots, those minimum lot size and width would go away. And then for new lots, it would match the district's standards that are on the books at the time. At this time, it's 6,000 square feet and 60 feet wide. That change is really, it's just aligning duplexes in these districts with the remaining things that are allowed in the districts. One other thing that this proposed amendment does, which we didn't really get into last time, but it cleans up a paragraph that essentially says if you have an existing lot, it doesn't have to meet the minimum requirements. It says that. It's pretty convoluted, though. So we're just cleaning that up as well as part of this proposed amendment. Otherwise, all of the other development regulations in these two districts remain unchanged. And also the zoning approvals that are required would continue to be that you would need a conditional use permit in the R2 district, and you would have by right duplexes in the R3 district. So regarding the zoning map, like I said, we provided static zoning maps in the packet, but zoning maps really only tell sort of part of the story as indicated by the R2 and R3 maps that I shared last time and that I shared with Plan Commission. Tonight I wanted to get a little bit more into the realities of duplexes, especially in the R2 or in the R2 district, since that seemed to be the hot topic last time. So I will get into that, but I want to preface this by saying, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that zoning does not cause development in any way. Zoning just provides the framework in which to allow development to take place. So just making a zoning change is not going to cause changes to happen. It will just allow them to happen if market conditions allow, make that a viable thing to do. In the R2 and in the R3 district, we have had more than 50 years of experience allowing duplexes. Again, duplexes in the R2 district will require a conditional use permit. I wanted to just look citywide. I know this isn't terribly easy to see right now, but citywide we have over 3,500 R2 zoned parcels. Out of those, we have a little over 1,700 that currently allow duplexes with a conditional use permit. So these are all ones that would meet the minimum standards that are in place. Out of those, now you can kind of see a little bit better. So these pink parcels are parcels that contain single-family homes. So that's over 1,400. That's a little over 80%. And the number of duplexes citywide is 49. So if you're thinking in terms of averages, we're averaging less than one duplex per year since we've had these rules on the books in the R2 district. So,
Kevin, can I stop you for a second? Just to make sure I understand these numbers that you're showing here.
Sure.
So your second one, 1743, says currently allows duplex with a conditional use permit. And what I'm hearing you say is that there's 1,743 that meet the minimums that are in our current zoning.
Correct.
But 49 of them contain duplexes.
Correct.
Okay, so that means that over 1,700 people could ask for a duplex and they would be able to do so, meeting the minimum width and the minimum lot. Is that correct?
Currently,
Okay,
yes. And that's been essentially the case for the past 50 plus years. So just picking a neighborhood at random, in West Urbana, so there are 768 R2 zoned parcels, 307 of which currently allow duplexes with a conditional use permit. 266 out of those 307 have single-family homes on them, and there are 20 duplexes in the West Urbana neighborhood. At least 10 of those were what we would call existing non-conforming uses, so they were created way back in the day before our zoning ordinance, before our zoning rules were in place. Okay, I'm gonna just, okay, I'll leave that up. One other point I wanted to make is that this amendment is not really about duplexes as an allowed use, which I think a lot of the comments we've heard and some of the conversation last time seemed to be focused on whether we should allow duplexes as a use. That's established in our zoning ordinance. It says duplexes should be allowed under certain conditions. So really this amendment is about allowing duplexes on lots that are smaller and sometimes very slightly smaller than we've required for the last half century. So I just want to make sure that we're focusing on that. Okay, so now that I've sort of gone through the bits that council asked us to look into last time, I'm going to invite the applicant, Mr. Huber, up to go through the materials that he provided to you all. David, are these the things that you emailed
Are these
them?
the items that you emailed?
I didn't at that time.
So these are not, we don't currently have access except for these paper copies, is that correct?
It would have been after 5.
I'm not sure if when it
This is directly from you. We received an email from you at 6:32 about
No, he sent, this is.
this.
I think that's different
This is
material.
something different.
It is something
Okay.
different.
I just wanted to clarify which. But we do have this in electronic format? Okay, great. All right, the floor is yours. Make sure your microphone's on, please.
Okay, so I prepared a few sheets. The first one is just a kind of breakdown, not only of the changes, but then what actually the criteria is, were you to get a conditional use permit or a major variance. And that comes straight from our zoning ordinance. It explains how both require a public hearing, but there's difference. Conditional use permit requires a simple majority. A major variance requires 2/3 majority of the ZBA, then a city council vote, and the criteria is significantly different. I would just point out, like, one of the contradictions
Can you
is-
hold on for just a moment? I apologize. We do have 2 people who are remote, and do they have access to the documents?
Mr. Huber, did you just forward it to my email?
No, like at 4:45.
So no, I did not have any emails at either my personal email or city clerk as of 5 p.m. because we were keeping track of public input as well. But what email address did you send it to is what I'm clarifying. Because if it was sent to city council, then the council does have a copy.
To you personally.
Okay, so no, the folks remote do not have access to these materials. But they are being displayed currently on the
They're not.
screen.
They're not being displayed on the screen. That's why I asked.
Right, I can,
I guess some of it is.
yeah, sorry, I did not include this first sheet on here. I can go, while Mr. Huber's talking, I can go run and grab that.
We don't even need to talk about it. It's more just
Okay.
putting onto one page what is in the zoning ordinance.
I just wanted to make sure that the people who are attending remotely had the same
Yeah.
information.
But you do have this one on the slide.
Yeah.
So this is in response specifically to, I think, Grace, who kind of wanted to understand, well, how does this actually play out in reality? So rather than a purely speculative case, I took a duplex that exists in our city. And for the purposes of this exercise, it doesn't actually matter where it is in the city. It was built in 1928. You could not build this duplex today for one reason, which is that the lot width is too narrow. This particular lot is 56 feet wide, so that's 4 feet under the minimum width of 60 feet because this lot was platted prior to that date. Otherwise, it meets all other requirements of the zoning ordinance, meaning the setbacks, the parking that's on site, the height, and so on. So I used that, and using the assessor's office, I found the from the property card, I took the floor plan information, and so that's how I derived on these 3 site plans the footprint of the house. On the left, I drew it. Well, that center drawing is as the house is today, with the setbacks, a driveway to the back, a garage, and so on. That wouldn't be allowed to be built today. So on the left is what, if you wanted to build the same duplex, you'd have to go and find a 60-foot lot at least, if it were platted before that date, and that is how it would be set up. So then I took with the exercise of this, I said, with that same house meeting all other requirements, let's assume there was no lot width minimum. What is the narrowest lot you would need to build this exact same duplex and meet every single other requirement of the zoning ordinance? And that is 45 feet, assuming it's the same length as that existing lot, which is 137 and 9 inches. And so that is based on the 30.5 feet width of that house, which comes from the assessor, a 5-foot setback on one side, and then the minimum width of a driveway is 9 feet according to the zoning ordinance, and the minimum distance between a driveway and a property line is 1.5 feet. So this is, this is showing the extreme. And so adding all those things up, it's 45 feet, meaning if this proposed amendment were to pass, you could have a 45-foot lot and build that duplex and meet every requirement of the zoning ordinance without special relief from any of the other requirements. And then as another exercise, which are the 2 sheets that are side by side, I took plans from actually South Bend, Indiana. Like some other cities, they commissioned drawings to be made of houses that are pre-approved, meaning you could go in and within a couple of days get approval to build these houses. And that was a way of incentivizing people to do infill, smaller housing, and so on. So I took a single-family house and a 2-family house as part of this, these pre-approved city plans, and I chose a single family that's the closest in size to this 2-family dwelling. So the single family on the left is 1,900 square feet. The 2-family is 1,700 square feet. The single family is 24 feet, and so on. And then I basically ran it through, where could you actually build this? You could build the single family on any lot as long as it's 39.5 feet. Because again, it's 24 feet wide, you need 5 feet on one side and 10.5 feet on the other. And you'd need a lot area of 4,750 square feet, which would meet, basically that's meeting that floor area ratio requirement, which would be unchanged in the R2 and R3 district. So meaning if you wanted to build that house, you'd have to find a lot at least that big. And then if you go over to the right side, the 2-family dwelling, however, even though it's actually smaller, it's 1,760 square feet, it's more narrow, it's 22 feet wide, but it interestingly has the same number of bedrooms in total, 4 bedrooms. If you wanted to build that duplex, you would have to find a lot that's 60 feet wide minimum. If it were platted before 1970, you'd need at least 6,000 square feet. If it was a lot after 1970, you need an 80-foot lot, 9,000 square feet. And then the last thing on the bottom right is if this ordinance was, if this amendment occurred, and you no longer had to meet those requirements to build this duplex and to satisfy every other requirement of the zoning ordinance, parking, setbacks, so on, you'd need a lot that's at least 75 and it's 37 and a half feet wide and 4,400 square feet. So the point really is the gulf between what we are currently saying is the minimum size of a lot and lot width that is needed for a duplex, and a prototypical duplex. Yes, it's prototypical. It's not any indication, but it is an indication that such thing is can be built, is habitable, most likely rentable, and so on. So that gulf between 60 feet and 37 and a half feet or 80 feet, you would need an 80-foot lot after 1970 to build this 22-foot wide house, is what the current zoning ordinance is saying. And I guess just the last bit of commentary, editorializing, is that, in fact, one could say it's really great to build duplexes on smaller lots because the effect will be units that are smaller in size, and those smaller size units add to housing mix that single family houses generally cannot provide, meaning studios or one bedroom apartments. So there's that housing diversity element. In this situation, it's two bedroom units. And then, there's some other information that's just photos of duplexes in West and East Urbana. They don't need explanation. They're just sort of, here's the stock that we have. It's not comprehensive. Again, the only little editorial I'd like to say is that on the left column, I show the house, and then on the right, I show the house next door to it with the house. And in every case, the house next door is a single family. So you'll see that it is not necessarily the case that the duplex is bigger than the single family next door. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're bigger, but in most cases, they are not jarringly different. So, yeah, that is to say that a duplex alone does not produce a larger building overall.
Questions for the applicant? Chris?
So Mary Alice, I'm going to say that this seems like materials that could have been provided in advance, such that myself and Sharice could look at it and actually understand what's being described here. At this point, it's not persuasive to me because I can't see it. So if we're going to vote on this, I'm going to vote no at this point because I haven't seen any additional information that persuades me to vote otherwise.
If I can add to that, because this isn't time sensitive, the other thing that I want to understand, because when you're talking about R2 and R3, I looked at the zoning map that was provided, and it seems as if a lot of actually practically all of the houses in Ward 3 are R2 and R3 as well. And I'm assuming that, I know that this particular zoning issue would affect everyone, not just everyone in one particular neighborhood. So what I want to understand regarding the history of some of this zoning, and I want to, isn't it true that a lot of times property taxes at the time, because all of the houses in my subdivision, for example, were built before 1970. So what I want to understand, too, is weren't some of these dwellings built in a particular way according to how property taxes were fixed at the time?
Kevin, are you able to answer that?
I'm not.
Okay. Perhaps that's a question for our assessor. They might have some insight into that.
Okay, because I need to understand. I mean, what you're basically talking about is changing that up for I guess the abilities for people that may own multiple homes in a particular area, and they may be able to change the atmosphere as well as the entire setting of how a particular area has been built. So it kind of and there's no guarantee that these will be sold properties. They for single families. There possibly will be rental units, and we have a very high rate of rentals in the city of Urbana, as opposed to home ownership. I definitely prefer home ownership. I just don't. So I don't really understand how it would be a benefit on some level, especially since a person has another avenue to already use to if they prefer to build something else differently.
All right. Chris, you had a question?
Thank you for the presentations. What is the price point? How much per month for renting in the duplex?
I'm not sure. That's not really a consideration that we take into consideration when we're making zoning changes.
Jaya?
Is this only questions or discussion, to clarify?
This is questions.
Okay. I'll hold off then.
There is no motion on the table right now, so at the moment, we're with questions with the applicant and staff. So if there are no further questions, I would entertain next steps. Jaya?
I'd like to make a motion to keep this in committee, because I think there's still a lot of questions that I'm hearing. So I'd like to move to keep ordinance number 2024-11-034, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning ordinance update section 6-3 for clarity, and to remove additional lot area with requirements for certain use, plan case number 2493T-24.
Second.
Moved by Jaya and seconded by Grace. So this motion is to keep this in committee. Any discussion? Jaya?
Yeah, thank you. I think making sure that folks who are not here can see this material is important, and I think it seems like there's still a lot of questions. I want to make sure that community members can have answered. I will say personally, I think it's really important that we clarify what is and isn't allowable, and that we're consistent, right? I think our zoning ordinance suggests this should be allowable. I think that there's a clear recommendation from the Plan Commission and from city staff who do have expertise in this area. I think the applicant used an allowable legal pathway, but I do think it's also important that we give time for people to understand why this is coming, what this means, all of that. I do also think it's important to recognize not everybody in our community can afford to buy a home. I hear people saying, well, we want these small homes for people to be able to buy. That was the case for myself. I understand that. But I think about my neighbors where I live. It's definitely a mix of rentals as well as homes that are owned. And a lot of people are looking for that kind of middle income, something that they can rent where they don't have to get pushed out of Urbana, right? I think that it's important for us to think about how do we have a mix, so it's not either you have enough money to own something or you're paying an arm and a leg for some tiny little place or you have to move out of Urbana. So I do think that making sure we have more opportunities for duplex is important. We've talked a lot about the fact that the city is really struggling with our infrastructure needs because people are moving out and out and out. That's not sustainable. We can't just keep growing out. We need to be able to look at infill, and it is, in terms of an equity issue, it's important too, right? There's a lot of research that supports that we're zoning people out, right? And I think it's important for us to think about how do we make sure that Urbana is for everyone. So I am very interested in looking at how do we make it so that we're actually allowing the things that are supposed to be able to be built in R2 and R3 to be able to be built, including duplexes. But I also am hearing that there's still a lot of questions from folks, so I'd like to keep it in the committee until those questions have an opportunity to be answered.
Any other discussion? Grace?
I'll just echo that. I appreciate keeping it in committee of the whole for some more time for council members to review stuff who aren't here, and for all of us, just since this is the first time we're seeing it, I think some more review time. And then also for the public, if there are any remaining questions, I hope that things are becoming more clear throughout this process. I appreciate the information and want to thank Kevin and David here for some of our information. I think that that's really helpful, seeing some of the renderings and some hypotheticals and some of the actual buildings. So I'm hoping that this is becoming more clear for council members and the public about what we're talking about. Always still in support of more information, and so for that sake, I'm happy to have some more time on this. And overall, I am in support. I think that this is making sense so far, and I appreciate that other information. I think duplexes, I agree with Jay, are a good option for housing diversity. I think they're good for our community socially and environmentally. My neighborhood in southeast Urbana has a number of duplexes, and I think that they enrich our community and don't have any harm. I think it's a great option as our society is also moving towards smaller type of families. There's been a lot of input, people bringing that up. In my neighborhood, it's a lot of seniors, single seniors on a fixed income, or single young professionals, and a duplex is a great option. So I think that this is making sense, and I'm also happy to have a little bit more time and information.
Chris, would you take the chair for me?
I will take the chair and recognize Mary Alice.
So first I want to say thank you for sharing these renderings. I will say that it actually confirms my stance that I don't think this is a good idea, and this is why. Number one, there's two things that I was thinking about in terms of affordability. The first one is anytime there's new construction, it's not affordable. It's not affordable housing, right? If there's brand new construction, it's going to be top dollar housing. But then the second thing actually didn't occur to me until the applicant had talked about, some of his plans, which is it sounded to me, I don't know if it was meant this way, but it sounded to me like dividing up houses. That's what it kind of sounded like in terms of creating a duplex. And, based on the comments of my fellow council members, I definitely think that there are areas where duplexes would be good. That's why we have R3 zoning. But I also think that there's areas that it's not going to work. And it actually, frankly, scares me that you could get away with no minimums with a 37-foot wide lot. That's small. And so I at the moment, I'm not convinced that the ordinance as it is something that is good for Urbana. I don't think it meets the accessibility, the affordability. I found it interesting that some of the pictures were actually down the street from me. There are many, many different kinds of housing available within 3 blocks of where I live. There's duplexes, rental houses, group houses, there's apartment buildings, there's like everything, and it's a half a mile to the University of Illinois. Rents range from $600 a month to on up, right? At least in my neighborhood. A very long-winded way of saying that I think that when we change the zoning ordinance, it needs to be right for the city. And what I'm hearing from people is that it's right for certain areas. And so if it's right for certain areas, then we need to have an avenue to facilitate those types of areas, but not make an overarching change for the entire city. So that's kind of where I'm standing. I'm okay keeping this into city council. I'm okay keeping this into committee right now. But I just wanted to let people know where my thoughts are right now. So I will take the chair back.
I will yield the chair back to Mary Alice.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion? Grace,
Yeah, one thing I'm going to add.
go for it, James.
Okay, one thing I want to add, and I think I may have mentioned this last time, is we have a comprehensive plan coming soon, and I really feel like if that plan is going to speak to this in any way, we should get a preview of how it would speak to it, because this is a major change. No matter what anybody says, this is a major change. It has significant impact on a number of areas in the city. That should be done through, I feel, through the comprehensive plan's guidance, as opposed to a response to a single request to make this change. That doesn't mean it's not, it won't turn out to be a viable change, but I think it should be informed by all the effort we have put into developing a new comprehensive plan. Thanks.
All right, Grace.
Thank you. I just kind of in response to that first kind of time hearing that thought about certain areas having different kind of duplex things, and my initial reaction is that I think that it should apply to the whole city and all of the zones. I mean, if it applies to R2, it should apply to R2 throughout the city. I think that having an exception for one neighborhood, and particularly one particularly vocal neighborhood, is not the right approach. I think it should apply more broadly, which I think maybe you're saying then if it's not right for everyone, then don't apply it for everyone. But I think that we should consider that whole issue together. And I'm still trying to understand the problem with this proposal, because just the way I'm seeing it is that if the Florida area ratio is still the same, the open space ratio is the same, you still can have a building higher than 35 feet, you still have to have at least 15 feet front yard, 5-foot side yard, 10-foot rear yard, and R2 still has a conditional use permit for public input at the ZBA for duplexes. I'm just not seeing the issue. So I'd like to, if anyone open to articulate that end, like I'm not seeing an issue with groundwater, with the city frontage, front yard thing. I'm not seeing what the problem is. So I think if there's that kind of logistical thing to lay out, I'm happy to hear it, but I'm not seeing what the problem is.
Any other discussion? All right, so the motion on the floor. Charisse?
I just want to say one thing. I think when we're talking about changing zoning and so on and so forth, and Grace was talking about she doesn't, see what the problem might be, and I guess, I guess my concern is more like, I think we want to be careful that we don't ghettoize, so to speak, any one particular area of the city. Affordable housing is usually in some people's minds synonymous with low income housing, and that is not the same. And what I don't want to see is a particular plan of a type of housing that becomes something that people you can only afford this particular thing based on your income, and so we want to be careful to also make affordable housing affordable housing. And sometimes what happens with redefining certain types of homes is that it can be defined for certain income people, so to speak, and I just don't want to see that happen. I want people to be able to feel free to live where they want to live. And I say that based on previous history with the city of Urbana and how things have been put in place before. So I really would like to see, I want to understand that you have folks that have worked all their lives to own homes, and yet when they sell it, what you're saying too is that somebody can take that home and turn it into two lots, on a lot or some kind of way, and it could be still profitable for one, but really not very helpful for the other. So I guess that's the problem I'm looking at as future, in the future of changing the zoning.
All right. Jaya.
So I think, there's a lot of discussion to have around this. I think what I'm hearing from Grace that I think is important to lift up is I want us to make factual decisions based on information, based on expertise, based on equity, based on best practices for small cities, which is what we are. We are a small city. Our population is increasing. There are not a lot of options for folks who are looking for that next step. And these areas are areas that are supposed to already allow duplexes from my understanding is. If I'm incorrect, I'm open to that information. I'd like to be corrected. But having a duplex built, if it was built next door to me, great, right? Great that Woona already has that. A lot of parts of the city, it's very difficult for folks to find places to live unless they're in a position to be able to afford to move out. I don't think that's responsible for us as a city. It costs more to continue to push people out farther and farther. And I want to be careful about how we are describing. We're talking about making it more approachable to build duplexes. And I think especially in my part of the city where we do have a lot of duplexes or a lot of homes that are connected, I certainly don't see that as ghettoizing it. I see I think the Fourth Ward, certainly the part of it that I live in is an incredibly diverse neighborhood, racially, economically, in terms of age. And what I worry about with my neighbors is that there are houses that are falling apart that people are still being asked to pay exorbitant amounts for rent, where there could be more opportunities if folks were able to build something that would actually be more appropriate. So I think if we're going to have rules, we need to be clear about them. I think what I see with this is trying to clarify contradictory pieces of the rules, hear what folks are saying in terms of the new comprehensive plan. I get that argument. But if we're going to say something is allowable, it should be allowable. If it's not allowable, it's not allowable. If we need to look at zoning things differently in the future, I get that. But I want to say that I think embracing the diversity of different forms of housing is a benefit to our community. And feeding into fear of what it means to have two families living next door instead of one is highly problematic.
All right. I think everybody except for Chandra's had a chance. Chandra, do you want to speak?
So I recently learned about a House bill in Congress called Yes in My Backyard. And it talks about land use policies and how it details a lot of the things that we're discussing here. And so if this is a conversation that's happening on the federal level, it most certainly should be happening on the local level. And it includes allowing duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes in areas zoned primarily for single-family residential homes, allowing multifamily development in retail, office, and light manufacturing zones, allowing reducing minimum lot sizes, increasing the allowable floor area ratio in multifamily housing areas. So if we're already talking about changing our zoning ordinance, we're a step ahead of the federal government. So I think that we're moving in the right direction, and I would be in support of this, what do you call it, amendment to the zoning ordinance, because it just is the right way to go to increase our housing stock, as Jaya mentioned, to infill what we have now.
All right, I think everybody's had an opportunity to talk. So there's a motion on the floor. And just to remind everybody, this motion is to keep it in committee. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, I think that stays. I don't know if everybody voted, but can I have a show of hands, actually? Because I didn't hear everybody's voice. So everybody who wants to keep it in committee, raise your hand. James and Charisse, I don't know, virtually wave your hand at us. So we can hear.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, all those who want to vote no, raise your hand. Okay, all right, that stays in committee. All right, thank you very much for your time. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items on our agenda. It is 10:15, folks. We're gonna have to go through this. Can I have a motion to extend this meeting till 11?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Jaya, seconded by Grace. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, all right, we're till 11, but we're gonna crank through these. All right, first item of new business, resolution number 2024-11074R, resolution authorizing acceptance of ADECO Community Development Block, I can't say the word anymore, COVID, can I call it code? COVID grant, CDBG CV. So, Nick.
Hello again. I'm going to help with speeding things along, and I'm actually going to speak to the next 5 items on the agenda. That's, again, resolutions 2024-11074R through the one that ends in 078R. These items are all related to acceptance of 3 different grants through the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, each of which has an acceptance resolution and 2 of which have a resolution for subrecipient agreements. So in total, there are 5 resolutions for the 3 grants. And then each of the 3 grants has its own memo in the packet. I'll quickly run through what the different grants are, how much funding there is, and what for. And then I'll leave it up to council to decide whether to discuss and vote on the items separately or together. So first, there is an award of $1,200,000 in Community Development Block Grant CARES Act or CDBG CV funding through the state DCEO. This is the memo that starts on page 66 of the packet for reference. These are funds that originated from a federal coronavirus relief package that was awarded to the state to manage for initiatives aimed at addressing homelessness and which, again, are now managed by the state DCEO. Earlier this year, the city applied for funds through this program to assist with the development of the Hope Village Permanent Supportive Housing Project, which would provide tiny homes for medically fragile individuals who have experienced homelessness. A public comment period and hearing were held prior to the submission of that grant application earlier this year. And then in September, the city was notified that the application was one of 12 in the state approved for an award. So this evening, you have 2 resolutions before you related to this particular grant. One related to the city's acceptance of those funds, and then one subrecipient agreement granting those funds to Hope Village Incorporated. And then the next grant is another set of funds through the DCEO. This is $250,000. The memo for this particular grant starts on page 80. This has also been awarded for construction costs related to the Hope Village project, and this was through a line item appropriation from the State of Illinois General Revenue Fund, and would also be project-specific funding. And similar to the last grant, you also have a resolution for both acceptance of those funds and a subrecipient agreement. And then on page 92 of the packet, there is a memo for another $250,000 grant from the State of Illinois General Revenue Fund. This would be for a pilot fleet electrification project. This one just has a resolution to accept those funds since those would be managed within the city. A little more details on that. It would pay for some facility upgrades to support electric vehicle charging at the Public Works facility for city fleet vehicles, and would also pay for replacement of current gas vehicles within the Public Works fleet with electric vehicles once the former has outlived their useful lifespan. So that's a general overview of what these grants are. Staff are recommending acceptance of all the awarded grant funds and approval of the related subrecipient agreements where present. In the case of the Hope Village grants, we find acceptance of these funds consistent with council goals related to reducing homelessness, as well as generating affordable housing, as well as previous council actions in support of the Hope Village project. And then in the case of the grant to Public Works for the fleet electrification project, we find this consistent with council goals related to quality of infrastructure, as well as sustainability of infrastructure. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe some representatives from the Hope Village project are here as well if there are questions about that side of things. And then Tim Cowan from Public Works is here as well, who can perhaps provide some more details about the fleet electrification project. Thank you.
All right, questions for staff? Grace.
I have one about the fleet electrification. I think it was, majority of it was for charging infrastructure. And so I was wondering, would that be centralized like at the Public Works building, or are we going to have multiple charging places? Kind of what's that plan?
So we had attempted previously to do an RFP to look at more like public charging station build out, and it was unsuccessful. They weren't awarded the grant. We shifted gears and said, because of some of the federal dollars through CJA and things right now, and it's kind of, it's slowly rolling out. They're hitting the main corridors, I-57, 74, things like that with some of those programs now, and then they're going to branch out that the highest and best use of our time for the time being would be focusing on ourselves as the city of electrifying our fleet. So the intent of that money is actually to build out charging infrastructure for city fleet vehicles at Public Works and then pay the upgrade costs to go from a gas-powered vehicle to an EV in the replacement cycle for future vehicles there. But no, it would not be building out infrastructure throughout the community. It would be at the Public Works campus, infrastructure charging for EVs for our fleet.
Other questions for staff? So the 250 is for Public Works, and then is it 1.24 for Hope total?
So there was 1.2 for Hope
Right.
Village. That was through the CDBG CV fund.
Right.
And then there was an additional $250,000 that was just also through the DCEO, but through a state of Illinois general revenue line item
So about
appropriation.
1.4 mil.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, Sharice.
My understanding then is that the DCEO Community Development Block Grant is pinpointed for the Hope Village period. There's no other organization to be receiving the CDBG.
That's correct. For these funds in particular, these were awarded in response to an application that the city submitted specifically in support of this project.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
James, do you have any questions? All right, so we have five items on here. Oh, sorry, James, did you have any questions?
No, I do not. I was just slow on the mute key.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna ask if we can put this in, we can either do one omnibus and then put it on the consent, or we can just move each individual one to consent. But those are, I don't know which direction council wants to go tonight.
Would move omnibus of, I would say maybe the first 4, but I could do all 5. But unless anyone's going to want to divide those out, we could just save that and bundle
I'd
the
like
first
to
4.
have the electrification divided out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll do the first 4.
So I read them all and move to omnibus those? Okay. So I'd move that we omnibus resolution number 2024-11-074R, resolution authorizing acceptance of DCO Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus. Also, resolution number 2024-11-075R, resolution approving CDBG CEV subrecipient grant agreement with Hope Village, Inc. Resolution number 2024-11-076R, resolution authorizing acceptance of DCEO grant, Hope Village, and resolution number 2024-11-077R, a resolution approving a subrecipient grant agreement with Hope Village, Inc.
Second.
All right, on the floor is a motion to omnibus the first 4 items on here. It's moved by Grace and seconded by Chandra. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
All right. That moves forward as omnibus. Now we need to move that on to city council. So I would take a motion to move that omnibus onto either consent or regular agenda.
I'll move the omnibus set of resolutions onto city council for approval on the consent agenda.
A second.
All right, seconded by, first by Chandra, seconded by Jaya. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
No.
All right. We have item number 5. So that one was not included in the omnibus. So I'll need a separate motion for that one.
Move resolution number 2024-11-078R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of DCOE grant Urbana Pilot Fleet Electrification Program to City Council consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
All right, moved by Grace. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Sharice. Seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Huh? Yeah, she said consent. All right, the last item in new business is ordinance number 2024-11036, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 2, omnibus. Elizabeth.
I'm going to try to make this one easy too, because you've discussed a number of these items already this evening. So I'll mention those real quickly and then talk about a couple others. So you have already discussed you just discussed several of the grants in here. So in here, we're showing the fleet electrification grant and the 2 grants they're getting passed through to Hope Village. We're also showing, as Tim mentioned earlier, the $300,000 increase in the recycling fund to continue the weekly recycling through U-Cycle. So other than that, in the general fund, we're requesting $56,100 for consulting services related to fire service in the campus area, and this is related to an agreement between both of the cities and the university, and there would be a reimbursement of $34,000 coming from the other partners in that. There are a couple of corrections to the budget for the community engagement team. These are just errors made in entries during the budget process. No change in the program, but a couple things just got in incorrect line items. Let's see, a couple of rebudgets in the capital replacement and improvement fund related to facility projects. Again, rebudget just means was something we thought would be under contract and committed before June 30th. That didn't happen, so we're just rolling it forward into the current fiscal year. We would reflect reduced revenue from the local motor fuel tax, $200,000 less, just related to what we had anticipated in the budget versus what we know now is actually approved. And then some corrections and cleanups in the VERF. Some of those have to do with timing of purchases, similar to the items in the capital improvement fund. Some of them have to do with an error that occurred in reconciling items on the equipment list that we provided in the budget to the actual numbers in the line items. Other than that, I think that's everything that I have.
Questions? No questions. Sharice and James, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions right now.
Me neither.
All right, well, I would entertain a motion.
I got a question.
Oh, Grace.
Elizabeth, I was looking at the attachment, and one of the last transfers from police patrol says transfer to VERF of that 45,000. I just
Yeah.
wanted to check that was right. I thought stuff was in the VERF that wasn't supposed to be.
Correct. I'm not sure exactly where you're looking, but what we're doing is, there was money that was budgeted as a transfer to VERF, so somebody mistakenly assumed that the equipment we were talking about was capital equipment. It wasn't. And so we're going to show that as an expense in the general fund versus a transfer into the VERF. So we only budget capital equipment in the VERF.
Okay, but you're saying it is correct that it should say description transfer to VERF fund this 45. Oh no, it's going out. That's the
It's
negative
coming
45.
out, right, yeah, it's a
okay, so other
reduction.
supplies. So transfer to VERF, but it's negative, meaning you're taking it from there, right?
Correct, and we're putting it in a line item for supplies.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with no further questions, I would entertain a motion.
I move approval of ordinance number 2024-11-036, and ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 2, omnibus.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Chandra and seconded by Chris. Discussion. Yes, Grace.
I would like to divide the question for the CET, Community Engagement Team, budget transfers. Those 4 items I'd like to divide from the other.
I'd like to
Budget amendment
suggest,
pieces.
I feel like there's a motion on the floor. I don't know if we can divide the question. We can divide the question, but after that motion.
No, you can divide the question before
That's
final
what I thought.
action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we can divide it
do
now.
If it moves on to city council, you can divide it there.
That's not what I was saying.
Oops, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was saying now is an appropriate time to divide the question to consider the individual components. So am I correct, Grace, that you were only pulling out certain items to be considered separate from the rest of them? So the rest of them would be considered with the main motion. Grace is dividing the question and pulling those items out.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So Grace, which one are you pulling out? The community engagement?
Yes, those 4 transfers for Community Engagement Team.
Okay. All right. So do we need a motion for the ones that are, no, they're all in
So we would need a motion to approve or deny the 4 community engagement ones. And Grace, am I correct? Is that just one item, or were you wanting to take the individual items that you're pulling one at a time?
Yeah, so just those 4
as
CET
one.
as one thing
One
versus
group?
the rest of them.
Okay.
So we've got 2 groups of things. One is all the things related to the community engagement, and one is everybody else. Is that correct? Okay. So there is.
Doesn't the motion on the floor count as the motion? We're just splitting that into 2.
Yes. Yes, I think that's right.
So the motion on the floor is to approve everything except for the community engagement item that you have just divided out for consideration.
Okay.
All right. I don't know if everybody heard that. So right now, the motion on the floor is everything in the omnibus number 2, except for the items that relate to the community engagement office. So that is what is up for discussion right now. Any discussion?
And why are we separating stuff from the community, separating community engagement?
Grace divided the question.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm
now
trying to understand.
we're discussing everything but the community engagement.
Okay.
All right, Chris, will you you take the chair for me?
I will take the chair and recognize Mary Alice.
So I thought I'd give my rationale for why I'm going to vote against this. It's my only opportunity to vote against the single week versus every other week recycling. I fully expect this to pass, but this is where the money comes to pay those contracts. So that's my rationale for not voting for this. And now I will take the chair back.
The chair is yielded back to Mary Alice.
Thank you. All right. With no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
No.
All right. So the ayes have it. It moves on to City Council since this is not final action and it doesn't require a supermajority. The next question up is the community engagement officers. Discussion. Okay. No discussion.
What is the issue? What's the issue with regarding the budget for the community engagement? Are we voting to move that forward, or what are we voting for?
So that's a good question. So all the items in omnibus number 2 for the budget amendment that relate to the community engagement officers is up to be sent to City Council if everybody votes, the majority votes yay, nay. And then if it gets voted down, then it doesn't move forward to City Council. So right now it's approval to City Council. So if you vote yes, then it goes on to City Council.
Approve this to go before City Council.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, that moves forward onto City Council. Yep, it was 5-2. All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I apologize, it's a late hour and we kind of lose our place. Last item up on the agenda is council input and communications. Does anybody wish to provide input? James, do you want to provide input during this meeting?
Not at this time.
Therese?
Not at this time.
All right, with no further business, and oh, Grace, yes.
Is that recognizing? Or, yeah, okay. Just want to say about the Hope Village grants and developments. I know that this has been an issue that doesn't have, full agreement consensus like almost every issue that we have here. But just didn't want to gloss over some of that we have some kind of different perspectives here. And I know those all got omnibused and on the consent agenda, but just wanted to say that I'm willing, and any council person has the right to pull that on the regular agenda if we do want any discussion. People are still welcome to share their input, and I welcome people to reach out, and if you'd like to have more of a conversation, I'm open. Thank you.
All right, going once, going twice.